The Dark Reality. Life in Medieval Europe. A journey through history's harshest era. Welcome to a journey through one of history's most misunderstood periods. Before you fall asleep, please subscribe to the Edutaining History channel to get notifications of our next videos, and don't forget to like this video. Please let us know in the comments from where you are listening to us and what time it is. When most people think of medieval times, their minds conjure images of noble knights in shining armour, fair maidens in castle towers, and grand feasts in torchlit halls. Hollywood has painted the Middle Ages as a time of romance, chivalry, and adventure. But the reality was far different and far darker. Tonight we're going to strip away the romantic veneer and examine what life was truly like for ordinary people during the medieval period. We'll walk through a single day in the year 1325, experiencing firsthand the brutal realities that defined existence for millions of Europeans. This isn't a tale of castles and quests. It's a story of survival against overwhelming odds, where simply making it through another day was an achievement worthy of celebration. The truth is stark. If you were transported back to medieval Europe tomorrow, you probably wouldn't survive a week, let alone thrive. The challenges were relentless, the dangers omnipresent, and the comforts we take for granted today were either non-existent or reserved for the tiny elite who ruled over the masses. So, prepare yourself for a journey into a world where fleas were constant companions, where a simple cut could mean death, and where the very act of drinking water was a gamble with your life. This is the real Middle Ages, unvarnished, unromanticised, and utterly unforgiving. Chapter 1. Dawn of Misery. Waking up in medieval times. The year is 1325, and you're awakening to what passes for morning in medieval Europe. But this isn't the gentle stirring we know today, accompanied by soft pillows and warm blankets. Instead, you're jolted awake by the harsh clanging of church bells, the medieval equivalent of an alarm clock, only infinitely more jarring and completely inescapable. Your bed, if it can even be called that, is a nightmare of discomfort. Beneath you lies a straw mattress that's seen better days, probably 3 months ago when it was literally a barn floor. The straw has since decomposed into a fetid mixture of hay, insect droppings, and unidentifiable organic matter that creates its own ecosystem of decay. There's no memory foam here, no ergonomic support, no thread count to boast about, just a wool blanket that hasn't been washed since the previous winter and now weighs as much as a small animal due to the accumulated layers of grime, sweat, and bodily fluids. The concept of personal space is entirely foreign in your medieval dwelling. Your home is a single-room wooden hut that serves as bedroom, kitchen, dining room and barn all at once. Privacy is a luxury that simply doesn't exist. Your entire family, parents, siblings, possibly a stray cousin who never quite left, all share this cramped space. But you're not alone with just your relatives. Your livestock also calls this place home. Goats, chickens and pigs wander freely through your living space, contributing their own aromatic signatures to the already overwhelming bouquet of smells. Speaking of smells, the olfactory assault is immediate and unrelenting. The air is thick with a complex symphony of odours. Stale beer from last night's dinner, human sweat accumulated over weeks without bathing, animal waste from your four-legged roommates, and something that might be mould but could just as easily be last month's dinner slowly decomposing in a corner. Scented candles haven't been invented yet, and even if they had, They would simply melt into the dirt floor that serves as your home's foundation. The architecture of your dwelling is as primitive as it is uncomfortable. Windows are a luxury you can't afford. Instead, you have holes in the walls covered with cloth or animal skins that do little to keep out the elements. The roof is made of thatch that leaks whenever it rains, which means your floor alternates between being a muddy swamp and a crusty wasteland depending on the weather. As you attempt to stretch your aching limbs, every joint in your body protests. At the ripe old age of 22, you're already considered middle-aged by medieval standards. Your spine cracks like old timber, your knees sound like a bag of rocks being shaken by an enthusiastic child, and your muscles ache from the constant physical labour that defines your existence. The simple act of getting out of bed is a calculated risk. The floor might be wet from last night's rain seeping through the roof, or it might be crusty from something your neighbour's chicken deposited during the night. This is how every single day begins in medieval Europe, with discomfort surrounded by filth, in a space that would make a modern prison cell seem luxurious by comparison. And this is just the beginning of your day. The challenges ahead will make this uncomfortable awakening seem like the highlight of your medieval experience. Chapter 2: The Call of Nature. Medieval bathroom horrors. Now that you've successfully extracted yourself from your medieval bed of horrors, nature calls. And in the 14th century, nature doesn't call politely, it screams with the urgency of someone who knows that relief, when it comes, will be neither comfortable nor sanitary. The concept of a modern bathroom is as foreign to medieval life as space travel. There's no porcelain throne, no soft toilet paper, no privacy, and certainly no flush mechanism to whisk away your troubles. Instead, you're faced with what can only be described as a daily adventure in human waste management that would challenge even the strongest stomach. If you're a peasant, which statistically you almost certainly are, your bathroom is likely a wooden bucket positioned behind your house. This bucket has seen better days, and those days were probably several months ago. It's already filled to capacity because Uncle Wolfgang had a particularly rough night after consuming some questionable turnips. The smell emanating from this receptacle is so powerful it seems to have achieved sentience, reaching out to assault your nostrils from several feet away. But here's where medieval bathroom etiquette gets truly charming. Once you've added your contribution to the bucket, you don't simply leave it there. Oh no, that would be far too civilized. Instead, you carry this aromatic treasure to your window and dump it directly into the street below. The polite thing to do is shout "Gardez-le," Old French for "watch out below," before releasing your payload. However, this warning system is about as effective as you might expect, given that most people are either too slow to react or simply have nowhere to go to avoid the incoming biological warfare. The streets of medieval towns are essentially open sewers, flowing rivers of human waste, animal droppings and mysterious liquids that you'd rather not examine too closely. Walking through town requires the agility of a dancer and the luck of a lottery winner to avoid stepping in something that will haunt your nostrils for days. If you're fortunate enough to live in a town with public latrines, congratulations, you get to experience communal defecation. These public facilities are essentially outhouses where privacy is a myth and ventilation is a cruel joke. You'll sit shoulder to shoulder with strangers, making awkward small talk while trying not to breathe too deeply. The social dynamics of medieval public restrooms are complex and uncomfortable, involving unspoken rules about eye contact, conversation topics, and the proper etiquette for sharing space during humanity's most vulnerable moments. For those living in castles, the situation is marginally better but comes with its own unique hazards. Castle bathrooms, called guardrobes, feature holes in the wall that drop waste directly into the moat below. While this might seem like an improvement, it creates its own problems. Enemy forces quickly learned about these waste chutes and sometimes used them as unconventional entry points during sieges. Imagine defending your castle only to discover that attackers are literally climbing up through your toilet system. It gives new meaning to the phrase, entering through the back door. The absence of toilet paper means that personal hygiene after bathroom visits involves whatever materials you can scavenge: straw, leaves, rags, moss, or if you're feeling particularly indulgent, a scrap of wool. Sometimes people simply made do with nothing at all, which might explain why handshakes weren't particularly popular during this period. Regardless of your social status, medieval bathroom experiences are cold, public, dangerous, and universally disgusting. One slip on a wet stone path and you could find yourself face first in humanity's collective leftovers. It's a daily reminder that in medieval times, even the most basic human functions are fraught with peril, discomfort, and social humiliation. Chapter 3. Breaking Your Fast, the Medieval Breakfast Experience. Having survived the morning's bathroom adventure, you might reasonably expect some comfort in the form of a warm, nourishing breakfast. Unfortunately, this is medieval Europe, where comfort is a foreign concept and nourishment is more about survival than satisfaction. Your breakfast table is either a rough wooden surface or simply a spot near the fire where you can squat with your wooden bowl. There are no eggs Benedict here, no coffee brewing in the corner, and certainly no avocado toast. Instead, you're presented with a bowl of something that looks like it was scraped off a muddy boot and given the optimistic name of pottage. Pottage is the cornerstone of medieval cuisine, and calling it cuisine is generous. It's a thick, gloopy stew made from whatever ingredients you can find, afford or steal. The base is usually grains, barley, oats or rye if you're lucky, mixed with root vegetables and perhaps a few beans if fortune has smiled upon you recently. This mixture has been simmering in the same pot for days, possibly weeks, with new ingredients simply dumped on top of the old ones as they become available. It's less of a recipe and more of an ongoing culinary experiment that no one particularly wants to taste. The pot itself is a blackened cauldron that hangs over your fire, and it's never truly cleaned, just refilled and stirred and stirred. The bottom layers of pottage have achieved a consistency somewhere between concrete and tree sap, while the top layers float in a greasy film that reflects the firelight like an oil slick. The flavour is best described as earthy, though that's being charitable. It tastes like disappointment mixed with desperation, seasoned with whatever herbs you could forage without getting arrested for trespassing. Accompanying your pottage is a hunk of bread that could double as a weapon. Medieval bread is made from coarse rye or barley flour, often bulked up with creative ingredients like sawdust, ground acorns, or even clay to make the grain stretch further. This loaf isn't something you slice, it's something you negotiate with. The crust is hard enough to deflect arrows, and the interior has the texture of wet sand mixed with wood chips. Eating it requires strategy, patience, and strong teeth, assuming you still have any. Your beverage of choice isn't orange juice or coffee, it's beer. Yes, beer for breakfast and not by choice. The local water supply is teeming with parasites, bacteria, and various forms of microscopic death, so weak ale is actually the safer option. This isn't the craft beer you might enjoy today. It's a thin, sour liquid with just enough alcohol to kill some of the harmful microorganisms while leaving you slightly dizzy and vaguely nauseous. Children drink it too because the alternative is potentially fatal dysentery. Fresh meat is a fantasy reserved for Sundays and saints' feast days, and only if your lord is feeling particularly generous. Most peasants consume meat only a few times per year, usually during religious celebrations or when an animal dies of natural causes and needs to be eaten quickly before it spoils completely. Fresh fruit exists only when it's in season and hasn't already been claimed by birds, insects, or the local nobility. Spices are worth more than gold and are locked away like precious jewels. A pinch of pepper costs more than most people earn in a month, so your pottage is seasoned with whatever you can forage. Wild onions, bitter herbs, and the occasional handful of salt if you're extraordinarily fortunate. Most meals taste like wet burlap sprinkled with regret. The entire breakfast experience is a reminder that in medieval times, food isn't about pleasure or nutrition. It's about survival. You eat what's available, when it's available, and you're grateful for the opportunity to fill your stomach with something that probably won't kill you immediately. The concept of enjoying your food is as foreign as the concept of indoor plumbing, and about as likely to be realised in your lifetime. Chapter 4. Dressing for Discomfort, Medieval Fashion and Hygiene. With your stomach grudgingly accepting its morning ration of questionable pottage, it's time to get dressed for the day ahead. In the modern world, this might involve choosing from a closet full of options, but in medieval Europe, your wardrobe consists of exactly one outfit. One. And you've been wearing it every single day for months, possibly years. Your clothing is a testament to the medieval philosophy that if something isn't completely falling apart, it's still perfectly functional. Your outfit consists of a rough wool tunic or linen shift that has absorbed so much sweat, dirt, and various bodily fluids that it's achieved its own unique ecosystem. The fabric is scratchy, stiff, and has developed a patina of grime that could probably be carbon dated to determine when you last attempted to clean it. Underwear is optional, and by optional we mean it usually doesn't exist. If you're particularly fortunate, you might have a linen under tunic, but most people go commando under layers of scratchy, sweaty wool. This creates a delightful friction situation that ensures you'll be constantly uncomfortable and perpetually itchy. The wool itself is lovingly hand-stitched by someone who may have had only a theoretical understanding of what a seam was supposed to accomplish. The concept of washing your clothes is theoretically possible, but practically challenging. There are no washing machines, no detergent, and absolutely no dry cleaners. If you wanted to clean your tunic, you'd need to haul water from a river or, heat it over a fire, scrub the garment on a wooden board using ashes or lye as soap, and then hang it in the sun to dry. Given that the sun makes an appearance approximately 3 days per year in medieval Europe, this process could take weeks. Most people simply wear their clothes until they disintegrate or until the smell becomes so overwhelming that even medieval standards of hygiene are offended. Footwear, if you're lucky enough to own any, consists of untreated leather, barely held together with whatever thread or sinew was available. These shoes offer about as much arch support as a banana peel and provide no protection against the various hazards that litter medieval streets. Most peasants simply go barefoot, navigating through mud, animal waste, sharp rocks, and what can only be described as medieval landmines of disease and decay. The result of this fashion situation is that your skin becomes a battlefield. Fleas, lice, and bedbugs have taken up permanent residence on your body, and they're not paying rent. Everyone has them. Nobles, peasants, monks, children. It's a universal medieval experience. You'll find yourself scratching your armpit with a wooden spoon while having a casual conversation with the local priest, and no one will even blink an eye because they're all doing the same thing. Your skin is raw from constant rubbing against rough fabric, and your scalp is a war zone of insect bites and irritation. If you develop a rash, there's no dermatologist to consult, no hydrocortisone cream to apply, and no one to tell you whether it's scabies, eczema, or just the natural result of living in medieval conditions. You simply accept that the rash will be your companion for the next several months, like an unwanted medieval sidekick that follows you everywhere. The lack of personal hygiene extends beyond clothing to every aspect of your appearance. Your hair is unwashed, uncombed, and probably home to various small creatures. Your fingernails are caked with dirt and worse, and the concept of deodorant won't be invented for several centuries. Everyone smells, constantly and powerfully, but since everyone smells equally bad, it becomes a sort of olfactory democracy, where no one has the right to complain about anyone else. This daily ritual of putting on the same filthy clothes and accepting your role as a walking insect habitat is just another reminder that medieval life is about endurance, not comfort. You're not getting dressed, you're putting on your armor for another day of survival in a world that seems designed to make every moment as unpleasant as possible. Chapter 5, The Smile of Decay. Medieval dental hygiene. Now that you're fully dressed in your aromatic medieval attire, you might consider flashing a smile to greet the day. However, in the Middle Ages, smiling is a risky proposition, not because of social conventions, but because of the horrifying state of your teeth. The concept of oral hygiene in medieval times is about as developed as their understanding of quantum physics. There are no toothbrushes, no toothpaste, no mouthwash, and certainly no dental floss. Some people might chew on a twig or rinse their mouth with wine or vinegar, but for the most part, your teeth are left to fend for themselves in a hostile environment of decay and neglect. By the time you reach your mid-20s, your smile resembles something that might be found in a haunted crypt. Cavities are not just common, they're universal. Your gums are swollen and bleeding, and what you might mistake for food stains on your teeth is actually advanced decay eating away at your enamel. You have more rot in your mouth than a medieval vegetable seller's cart at the end of a hot summer day. The medieval diet, while lacking in many nutrients, is surprisingly effective at destroying teeth. Sugar, while not yet the ubiquitous sweetener it would become, is increasingly available among the wealthy, imported at great cost and used to demonstrate affluence. If you're a noble, congratulations, you get to rot your teeth faster than the peasants. The rich consume small cakes, sweetened wines, and candied fruits that accelerate dental decay at an alarming rate. If you're poor, you'll achieve the same result more slowly through years of chewing gritty bread, fermented porridge, and whatever tough, fibrous food you can afford. Toothaches are as constant and reliable as medieval weather, always present, always threatening to worsen. The pain ranges from a dull, persistent ache to sharp, stabbing agony that makes you consider whether life is worth living. This isn't hyperbole. Dental pain in medieval times could be genuinely life-threatening, not just because of the agony it caused, but because of the infections that inevitably followed. When a tooth becomes unbearably painful, your options are limited and terrifying. Dentists, as we understand them, don't exist. Instead, you have barber surgeons. The same people who cut your hair also extract your teeth. This dual profession makes a certain medieval logic. If someone can handle sharp instruments around your head for grooming purposes, surely they can handle sharp instruments around your head for medical purposes. The tooth extraction process is a medieval horror show. There's no anesthesia, no sterile environment, and no real understanding of infection control. The barber surgeon uses iron hooks, pliers, and whatever other tools seem appropriate for the job. The procedure is performed by candlelight, often in the same space where haircuts are given with the same unwashed instruments. You're expected to remain conscious throughout the ordeal, gripping a wooden stick between your remaining teeth to prevent yourself from biting your tongue off in agony. Infected teeth present an even greater danger. Without antibiotics, a simple dental abscess can quickly develop into sepsis, spreading infection throughout your bloodstream. What we would treat today with a simple course of antibiotics could easily become a death sentence in medieval times. People regularly died from toothaches, not from the pain itself, but from the systemic infections that followed. The social implications of poor dental health extend beyond personal discomfort. Bad breath, halitosis, is universal and overwhelming. Everyone's mouth is a bacterial playground, producing odours that could knock a horse unconscious. Romantic relationships aren't judged by physical attraction or compatibility, but by practical considerations like land ownership and livestock holdings. Kissing, when it occurs, is more of an endurance test than an expression of affection. Even speaking becomes challenging when your mouth is full of decay. Many people develop lisps or other speech impediments as their teeth fall out or break off. By middle age, having a complete set of teeth is as rare as having a complete set of fingers. Accidents, disease, and neglect take their toll on every part of the medieval body. The psychological impact of constant dental pain cannot be understated. Imagine trying to concentrate on daily tasks, maintain relationships, or simply enjoy a moment of peace when every bite of food, every sip of liquid, every change in temperature sends lightning bolts of pain through your skull. Medieval people lived with this reality daily, developing a stoicism born not of choice but of necessity. Your mouth, in essence, becomes a microcosm of medieval life itself. Painful, infected, deteriorating, and largely beyond your control. It's a daily reminder that in the Middle Ages, even the most basic aspects of human existence are fraught with suffering and devoid of the comforts we take for granted today. Chapter 6. The Daily Grind. Medieval Labour and Survival. With your throbbing teeth and itchy clothing, it's time to begin the real work of medieval survival. If you're like 90% of the population, your job description is simple. Don't die while labouring for someone else's benefit. Welcome to the world of medieval peasantry, where your career prospects are as limited as your life expectancy. You're a serf, bound to the land and to the lord who owns it. This isn't employment in any modern sense. You can't quit, you can't negotiate your salary, and you certainly can't file a complaint with human resources. You work the fields that belong to someone who probably doesn't know your name and wouldn't care if he did. Your labour is the foundation upon which the entire feudal system rests. Yet you receive barely enough compensation to keep yourself alive. Your workday begins with the sunrise and ends only when darkness makes further labour impossible. There are no coffee breaks, no lunch hours, no weekends, and no vacation time. Sunday is theoretically a day of rest, but only if you're not harvesting crops, fighting off raiders, or dealing with some other crisis that threatens the survival of your community. The concept of work-life balance is meaningless when work is life and life is work. The tools of your trade are primitive and exhausting to use. Your primary implements are a wooden hoe, a rusty sickle, and whatever strength remains in your increasingly deteriorating body. There's no machinery to ease your burden, no technology to increase efficiency. Everything is done by hand, with your back, through the application of raw human muscle power that you can't afford to conserve. The work itself is back-breaking in the most literal sense. Fields must be ploughed by hand or with oxen if your lord is wealthy enough to provide them. You dig ditches, sow seeds, pull weeds, and carry water until your spine begins to curve into a permanent question mark. The repetitive motions and constant bending gradually reshape your skeleton, creating the hunched posture that marks you as a member of the labouring class. If you're a woman, your responsibilities multiply exponentially. You're expected to perform all the same agricultural labour as men, but you also bear the additional burden of childcare, cooking, cleaning, spinning wool, feeding animals, and maintaining the household. There's no recognition that you're doing twice the work. It's simply expected that women will handle both domestic and agricultural duties without complaint. Children begin contributing to the family's survival around age 5. There are no schools, no toys, no childhood as we understand it. A 5-year-old is given a tiny wooden rake and expected to help with planting and harvesting. By age 10, children are performing adult labour, their small bodies already showing the wear and tear that will define their entire lives. The few people who aren't farmers face their own unique challenges. Blacksmiths work with fire and molten metal in poorly ventilated workshops. Tanners handle animal hides and toxic chemicals that slowly poison their bodies. Coopers craft barrels while breathing wood dust and chemical fumes. Every profession involves exposure to dangers that would horrify modern occupational safety inspectors. The compensation for this endless labour is survival, nothing more. You're paid in food, shelter, and the privilege of continuing to work tomorrow. There's no upward mobility, no career advancement, no retirement plan. You work until your body gives out and then you die. If you're injured and can't work, you become a burden on your family and community with no social safety net to catch you. The psychological toll of this existence is immense. You wake up knowing that today will be exactly like yesterday, and tomorrow will be exactly like today. There's no hope for improvement, no dreams of a better life, no possibility of escape. Your entire existence is defined by the endless cycle of labour, survival and exhaustion. Yet somehow people endured. They found moments of joy in small things. A successful harvest, a child's laughter, a brief respite from pain. They developed a resilience born of necessity, a strength that came from having no other choice. But make no mistake, medieval labour wasn't character building or spiritually enriching. It was a grinding, relentless struggle against poverty, hunger and despair that consumed entire lifetimes and left little room for anything resembling happiness or fulfillment. Chapter 7. At the mercy of the elements, medieval weather and climate. After hours of back-breaking labour in the fields, you might hope for some relief from the elements. Unfortunately, medieval Europe offers no such comfort. Weather in the Middle Ages isn't just an inconvenience, it's a constant threat to your survival, and your medieval dwelling provides about as much protection as a paper umbrella in a hurricane. Winter in medieval Europe is a season-long battle against death by freezing. Your home has no insulation, no central heating and no weatherproofing. The wooden walls are riddled with gaps large enough to throw a chicken through, and your windows are covered with cloth or animal skins that provide minimal protection against the wind and cold. The fire in your hearth might seem like salvation, but maintaining it requires a constant supply of firewood that you can't afford and may not be legally allowed to gather. The legal complications of staying warm add another layer of misery to winter survival. Many forests are owned by nobles who jealously guard their timber rights. Gathering firewood from the wrong forest can result in fines, imprisonment, or even execution. Yes, you can literally be killed for picking up the wrong stick in medieval Europe. This means you're often forced to choose between freezing to death and risking legal punishment for trying to stay warm. Even when you do have fuel for your fire, the heat distribution in your medieval home is laughably inadequate. The fire provides warmth in a radius of about 3 feet, while the rest of your dwelling remains as cold as the outdoors. You huddle near the dying embers, wearing your one damp wool tunic, and still wake up with your nose frozen and your extremities numb. Frostbite isn't diagnosed as a medical condition, it's just called bad luck, and treated with the medieval equivalent of thoughts and prayers. Your feet are permanently cold and often wet, since your shoes, if you have any, are about as waterproof as a fishing net. Your fingers become so stiff from cold that they feel like tiny icicles attached to your hands. The simple act of gripping tools or performing fine motor tasks becomes nearly impossible when your hands are frozen solid. Summer brings its own unique torments. Your medieval home transforms from an icebox into a clay oven, trapping heat and humidity with no means of escape. There are no fans, no air conditioning, no cross-ventilation. The same walls that fail to keep out winter cold now trap summer heat like a medieval greenhouse designed by someone who hated human comfort. You can't simply remove layers of clothing to cool down because showing too much skin is considered scandalous and also exposes you to sunburn, insect bites and social judgment, so you sweat through your wool garments, creating a personal sauna that follows you everywhere. The combination of unwashed bodies, animal waste and trapped heat creates an olfactory experience that defies description. The insects emerge in summer with a vengeance that suggests they've been planning their assault all winter. Mosquitoes, flies, and various other flying tormentors descend upon you in clouds. They're attracted to your unwashed body, the smell of rotting food, and the general aroma of medieval life. You'll spend your nights swatting at invisible enemies while trying to sleep through the constant buzzing and biting. Working in the fields during summer is like labouring inside an oven. There's no sunscreen, no protective clothing, no shade structures. You bake under the relentless sun while performing physical labour that would challenge a modern athlete. Heat stroke isn't recognised as a medical condition, it's just called taking a bad turn and treated with the same medieval medical expertise that handles everything else, which is to say, not at all. The weather also directly impacts your food supply and survival prospects. A wet spring can ruin the planting season. A dry summer can destroy crops. An early frost can eliminate your winter food stores. You're completely at the mercy of weather patterns that you can't predict, can't control, and can't prepare for adequately. Rain presents its own challenges. Your thatched roof leaks like a sieve, turning your home into a muddy swamp. Your dirt floor becomes a slippery, treacherous surface that's part mud, part animal waste, and part decomposing organic matter. Walking inside your own home becomes an adventure in balance and luck. The psychological impact of being constantly uncomfortable cannot be understated. You're either shivering with cold or sweating with heat, always damp, always dirty, always at the mercy of forces beyond your control. The weather isn't just an inconvenience. It's a constant reminder of your powerlessness in a world that seems designed to make every moment as unpleasant as possible. Chapter 8. The Gamble of Hydration, Medieval Water and Sanitation. By now you're probably feeling thirsty. The combination of physical labour, questionable food and constant discomfort has left you craving something refreshing to drink. Unfortunately, in medieval Europe, the simple act of hydration is a potentially fatal gamble that requires careful calculation and a healthy dose of luck. The sparkling stream running through your village might look pristine and inviting, like something from a fairy tale. But appearances in medieval times are almost always deceiving. That clear, bubbling water is actually a cocktail of death waiting to happen. Upstream, someone has just emptied their chamber pot into the water. Further up, a dead pig is decomposing on the riverbank, slowly leaching its decay into the current. The water is teeming with parasites, bacteria, and microscopic organisms that would love nothing more than to take up residence in your digestive system. This is why medieval people, including children, drink beer for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's not because they're all functioning alcoholics. It's because fermented beverages are safer than water. The brewing process involves boiling water, which kills many of the harmful microorganisms that would otherwise cause dysentery, cholera, or worse. The alcohol content, while low, provides additional protection against bacterial contamination. The beer you're drinking isn't the craft brewed delight you might enjoy today. Medieval ale is weak, sour, and often cloudy with sediment. It tastes like liquid bread mixed with disappointment, but it's less likely to kill you than the alternative. Children as young as 5 drink this weak beer daily, not because medieval parents are irresponsible, but because it's literally the safest beverage available. Wine is another option if you're wealthy enough to afford it, but it comes with its own risks. Medieval wine is often adulterated with various substances to improve its flavour or extend its shelf life. Some of these additives are harmless, others are toxic. Drinking wine is like playing Russian roulette with a bottle. You might get a pleasant buzz, or you might get lead poisoning. The concept of bathing is viewed with deep suspicion by medieval medical authorities. The prevailing belief is that water opens your pores and allows disease to enter your body. This means that washing yourself is considered medically dangerous. You're supposedly cleaner and healthier if you maintain the protective layer of dirt and grime that has accumulated on your skin over months or years. Communal bathhouses do exist in some towns, but they quickly develop reputations as centres of gossip, scandal, and various forms of medieval entertainment that the church finds objectionable. Many bathhouses are shut down by religious authorities who view them as dens of iniquity rather than centres of hygiene. Even if you wanted to bathe, the logistics are daunting. You'd need to fetch water from a well or stream, heat it over a fire, fill a wooden tub that probably leaks, and then hope that no one else in your household uses the water before you do, or worse, after you. The entire process takes hours and requires resources that most people simply can't spare. Rainwater collection seems like a logical alternative, but medieval rain barrels are open containers where birds defecate, insects breed, and moss grows. The water that collects in these barrels is often more contaminated than the streams you're trying to avoid. The wells that supply many communities are marvels of medieval engineering, but they're also potential sources of contamination. Human and animal waste seeps into groundwater, and there's no understanding of how to prevent cross-contamination between waste disposal and water sources. Drawing water from a well is like playing the lottery. You might get clean water, or you might get a concentrated dose of everything that's wrong with medieval sanitation. The irony is that water, the most basic necessity of life, becomes one of the greatest threats to survival in medieval times. Every sip is a calculated risk, every drink a potential death sentence. You develop a constant low-level anxiety about hydration, knowing that the very thing your body needs most could be the thing that kills you. This creates a perpetual state of mild dehydration among the medieval population. People learn to function on minimal fluid intake, drinking just enough beer or wine to survive while avoiding the more dangerous water sources. The result is a population that's chronically thirsty, perpetually uncomfortable, and always aware that something as simple as a drink of water could end their lives. Chapter 9. Medieval Medicine, the Art of Polite Torture. After a day of medieval living, you're bound to feel unwell. Perhaps you've stubbed your toe on a rock, developed a rash from your unwashed clothing, or simply succumb to one of the countless ailments that plague medieval life. Naturally, you'll want to seek medical attention. Unfortunately, medieval medicine is less about healing and more about elaborate torture disguised as treatment. The foundation of medieval medical theory rests on the concept of the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. According to medieval physicians, all illness results from an imbalance of these bodily fluids. This theory is about as scientifically accurate as believing that the earth is flat, but it forms the basis for every medical treatment you'll receive. Got a fever? Clearly you have too much blood. The solution is bloodletting, deliberately draining your life force into a bowl using dull blades or hungry leeches. The irony that removing blood from someone who's already sick might make them weaker seems to escape medieval medical practitioners entirely. Barbers often perform this procedure, which means the same person who cuts your hair is also responsible for potentially bleeding you to death. The tools used for bloodletting are as primitive as they are terrifying. Fleams, sharp, lancet-like instruments, are used to open veins, while cupping glasses create suction to draw out blood. Leeches are considered a more refined option, though watching these slimy creatures attach themselves to your body and slowly swell with your blood is hardly reassuring. Feeling melancholy or anxious, that's obviously an excess of black bile, which requires purging through the liberal use of laxatives. Medieval physicians have an impressive array of substances designed to evacuate your bowels with extreme prejudice. These range from relatively mild herbal preparations to violent chemical concoctions that leave you weak, dehydrated, and questioning your life choices. If you break a bone or suffer a serious wound, you're entering truly dangerous territory. There's no anesthesia beyond the possibility of passing out from pain, no understanding of infection control, and no concept of sterile technique. Surgery is performed with knives that haven't been properly cleaned since the Crusades, in rooms lit by flickering candles, by practitioners whose medical training consists largely of apprenticeship and guesswork. The medieval understanding of anatomy is based more on ancient texts than actual observation. Dissection of human bodies is forbidden by the Church, so medical knowledge is derived from the examination of animals and the writings of ancient authorities, who are often wrong. This means that your surgeon might have a theoretical understanding of where your organs are supposed to be, but no practical experience with human anatomy. Wound treatment involves cauterizing injuries with red-hot irons, not for sterilization, since the concept of germs hasn't been invented yet, but because it seems like the logical way to stop bleeding. The smell of your own flesh burning is considered a normal part of the healing process. Medieval physicians believe that disease is caused by bad air or miasma, which leads to treatments focused on improving air quality rather than addressing actual medical problems. This might involve burning aromatic herbs, opening windows, or moving the patient to a different location. While these interventions are generally harmless, they're also completely ineffective for treating serious medical conditions. The concept of pain management is virtually non-existent. If you're suffering, it's either God's will, a test of your faith, or punishment for your sins. The idea that pain might be something to alleviate rather than endure is foreign to medieval medical thinking. You're expected to bear your suffering with dignity and gratitude, regardless of how excruciating it might be. Herbal remedies form a significant part of medieval medicine, and some of these are actually effective. Willow bark contains compounds similar to aspirin, and certain herbs do have genuine medicinal properties. However, the dosages are guesswork, the preparations are inconsistent, and the herbs are often contaminated with other substances that can be harmful or toxic. Mental illness is attributed to demonic possession, moral failing, or divine punishment. Treatment might involve exorcism, prayer, physical restraint, or simply abandoning the afflicted person to their fate. The idea that mental health conditions might have physical causes or respond to medical treatment is centuries away from being understood. If your condition worsens despite treatment, which it almost certainly will, this is seen as evidence that you need more aggressive intervention, more bloodletting, stronger laxatives, hotter cauterization. The medieval medical philosophy seems to be that if a little torture doesn't work, more torture surely will. The mortality rate for any serious medical intervention is astronomical. Simple procedures that would be routine today often result in death from infection, blood loss, or shock. Going to a medieval physician for help is often more dangerous than simply enduring your illness and hoping for the best. Perhaps most frustratingly, medieval medicine is expensive. The cost of consulting a physician, purchasing medicines, and undergoing treatments can bankrupt a family. You might survive your illness only to discover that the cure has left you financially ruined and deeper in debt to your feudal lord. The psychological impact of medieval medical care cannot be understated. Knowing that seeking help for an injury or illness might result in treatments that are worse than the original problem creates a culture of stoic endurance. People learn to live with pain, disability, and chronic conditions because the alternative, medieval medical intervention, is often worse than the disease itself. Chapter 10. The Evening Meal. Dining with Death. As the sun begins to set on your medieval day of suffering, you might look forward to the evening meal as a source of comfort and nourishment. Unfortunately, medieval dinner is less about satisfaction and more about playing Russian roulette with your digestive system. Food preservation in the Middle Ages is a constant battle against spoilage, and it's a battle that food usually loses. There are no refrigerators, no freezers, no vacuum sealing, just salt, smoke and hope. Your evening meat, if you're fortunate enough to have any, has been hanging for days in the open air, covered with flies and slowly decomposing. It's been preserved in questionable brine and possibly shared with various rodents who saw it as an opportunity for a free meal. The bread that forms the foundation of your dinner carries its own risks. In years when harvests are poor, desperate bakers bulk up their flour with whatever they can find: bark, sawdust, clay, or ground acorns. But the real danger comes from ergot, a fungus that grows on rye and causes a condition known as St. Anthony's fire. Eating ergot-contaminated bread can cause convulsions, hallucinations, gangrene, and death. It's like consuming bread laced with LSD and poison simultaneously. Your vegetables, when available, are limited to whatever happens to be in season and hasn't been claimed by insects, animals, or rot. Root vegetables like turnips form a depressing staple of the medieval diet. Turnips for breakfast, turnips for lunch, turnips for dinner, boiled, mashed, or floating in that eternal pot of pottage that's been simmering since your grandfather's funeral. Dairy products are another gamble with your health. Fresh milk spoils within hours in the absence of refrigeration, and there's no pasteurization to kill harmful bacteria. Butter and cheese last longer, but are breeding grounds for various microorganisms that can cause serious illness. People eat these products anyway because the alternative is often starvation. The concept of food safety is non-existent. There are no expiration dates, no health inspectors, no understanding of bacterial contamination. You eat what's available and hope for the best. The phrase, "when in doubt, throw it out," hasn't been invented yet, so you eat things that are clearly spoiled and pray that your stomach can handle whatever toxins they might contain. Seasoning your food is a luxury reserved for the wealthy. Spices like pepper, cinnamon, and nutmeg are worth more than gold and are locked away like precious jewels. For the average peasant, flavour comes from whatever you can forage: wild onions, bitter herbs, and the occasional handful of salt if fortune smiles upon you. Most meals taste like wet burlap seasoned with despair. The social and legal aspects of food acquisition add another layer of complexity to medieval dining. Game animals, rabbits, deer, wild boar, belong to the local lord, not to you. Being caught poaching can result in fines, imprisonment, or execution. That's right, your dinner could literally get you hanged. The irony that you might be executed for trying to feed your starving family is just another charming aspect of medieval justice. Cooking methods are primitive and dangerous. Your food is prepared over an open fire using iron pots that haven't been properly cleaned in months. The smoke from the fire flavours everything with a distinctive taste of burning wood and accumulated grease. Cross-contamination is inevitable when the same utensils are used for raw meat, vegetables, and everything else. Water for cooking comes from the same contaminated sources you're afraid to drink from, which means that even boiled foods can carry waterborne diseases. The cooking process might kill some harmful organisms, but it can't eliminate all the toxins and contaminants that have accumulated in your ingredients. Meals are eaten quickly and without ceremony. There are no dining rooms, no proper tables, no chairs. You squat near the fire, eat from wooden bowls with your hands or crude utensils, and try not to think too hard about what you're consuming. The goal isn't enjoyment, it's survival. The psychological aspect of medieval dining is perhaps the most depressing element. Every meal is a reminder of your poverty, your powerlessness, and your precarious position in the social hierarchy. You eat what you're given, when you're given it, and you're expected to be grateful for the opportunity to consume food that might kill you. Food poisoning is a regular occurrence, but it's not recognized as such. Stomach cramps, nausea, and diarrhea are just accepted as normal parts of life. The idea that these symptoms might be related to food quality is beyond medieval understanding. You suffer through these episodes and hope that whatever you ate doesn't cause permanent damage. The evening meal, rather than being a time of family gathering and comfort, becomes another test of endurance. You're not dining, you're gambling with your health, hoping that tonight's food won't be the meal that finally does you in. Chapter 11. The Weight of Faith, Religion and Social Control. As darkness falls over your medieval hovel, you might think the day's trials are ending. However, in medieval Europe, God is always watching, and so is everyone else. Religion isn't just a part of life, it is life, controlling every aspect of your existence from the moment you wake up until you fall asleep, and even invading your dreams with threats of eternal damnation. The Catholic Church operates as your spiritual landlord, and you're perpetually behind on rent. Every action, every thought, every breath is subject to religious scrutiny and potential condemnation. The Church controls your calendar, dictating when you work, when you rest, when you eat, and when you fast. Your entire life is structured around a complex system of religious obligations that you can't escape, can't question, and can't afford to ignore. Prayer bells ring throughout the day, not as gentle reminders, but as mandatory summons. Missing prayer isn't just discouraged, it's a sin that could damn your soul for eternity. You're expected to drop whatever you're doing, no matter how urgent, and participate in religious observances. The church bell doesn't ask if you're busy, it commands your immediate attention and compliance. The catalogue of sins in medieval Christianity is exhaustive and seemingly designed to make normal human behaviour a pathway to hell. Forget to bow at the appropriate moment, sin. Eat meat on Friday, sin. Have impure thoughts about your neighbour's wife, double sin. Work on a holy day, sin. Question church doctrine, heresy, which is worse than sin and often punishable by death. Hell is not an abstract concept in medieval Christianity. It's a vivid, terrifying reality described in graphic detail by priests who seem to take perverse pleasure in cataloguing its torments. Rivers of fire, lakes of boiling blood, demons with pitchforks, and eternal wailing are standard elements of Sunday sermons. If the plague, starvation, and daily suffering don't motivate you to obey, the threat of infinite torture certainly will. You can't read the Bible yourself because it's written in Latin, a language reserved for the educated elite. This means you're entirely dependent on the church to interpret God's will for you. If the priest says your crop failure is divine punishment for insufficient piety, you have no way to verify this claim or offer an alternative interpretation. The church holds a monopoly on religious truth, and questioning that monopoly is both dangerous and futile. Tithes, a tenth of everything you own, are not optional donations but mandatory taxes. If you grow wheat, you give wheat. If you raise chickens, you give eggs. If you have nothing, you're expected to give your labour or go into debt to meet your religious obligations. The church grows wealthy while you grow poorer, but questioning this arrangement is tantamount to questioning God himself. The religious calendar is packed with holy days that require specific observances. These aren't holidays in the modern sense, they're obligations. You must attend mass, participate in processions, fast when required, and demonstrate appropriate levels of devotion. Failure to show sufficient religious enthusiasm can result in social ostracism, economic punishment, or worse. Confession is a regular requirement that forces you to catalogue your sins for a priest who may or may not keep your secrets. The act of confession is supposed to provide spiritual relief, but it also gives the church detailed knowledge of your private thoughts and actions. This information can be used to control your behaviour, manipulate your relationships, or even provide evidence for legal proceedings. The church's control extends beyond spiritual matters into every aspect of daily life. Marriage, birth, death, business transactions, legal disputes, all fall under religious jurisdiction. You can't escape the church's influence by avoiding religious services because the church is involved in everything that matters in medieval society. Questioning religious doctrine is not just discouraged, it's deadly. Heretics are burned alive, witches are drowned or hanged, and blasphemers are publicly flogged. Even expressing mild skepticism about church teachings can result in accusations of heresy, which carry penalties ranging from excommunication to execution. The church maintains its authority through fear, and that fear is very real and very justified. The psychological impact of living under constant religious surveillance is profound. You develop a perpetual anxiety about your spiritual state, constantly worried that you've committed some sin that will damn your soul. Every misfortune is interpreted as divine punishment, every stroke of luck as undeserved mercy. You live in a state of spiritual terror, afraid of both earthly punishment and eternal damnation. Religious festivals and processions provide some relief from daily drudgery, but they're also displays of church power and community conformity. You're expected to participate enthusiastically, demonstrate appropriate levels of devotion, and contribute financially to religious celebrations, even when you can barely afford to feed your family. The church promises that your suffering in this life will be rewarded in the next, but only if you remain obedient, faithful, and submissive. This creates a system where earthly misery is not just tolerated, but celebrated as a pathway to salvation. You're encouraged to embrace your suffering, accept your poverty, and thank God for the privilege of enduring hardship. In medieval Europe, religion isn't comfort, it's control. The church doesn't just save souls, it owns them, along with the bodies they inhabit and the lives they live. Chapter 12, The Burden of Womanhood, Gender and Survival. If navigating medieval life as a man is challenging, Experiencing it as a woman is like playing the same brutal game on expert mode with no health potions and no possibility of respawning. Medieval women face all the same hardships as men: the filth, disease, starvation and violence, plus an additional layer of gender-specific oppression that makes survival even more precarious. From the moment of birth, a girl's life trajectory is predetermined and severely limited. Your value is measured not by your intelligence, creativity or potential, but by your ability to bear children and serve men. Education is largely forbidden. Unless you're born into nobility and destined for a convent, your intellectual development ends around the time you learn to churn butter and mend clothing. Marriage in medieval times is not a romantic partnership, but a business transaction involving land, livestock, and political alliances. You have no say in choosing your husband. That decision is made by your father, your lord, or whoever else has authority over your life. Marriage often occurs shockingly early. Being betrothed at 12 and pregnant by 14 is not unusual but expected. The concept of consent is irrelevant when you're essentially property being transferred from one male owner to another. Once married, you become your husband's legal property in every meaningful sense. You can't own land, conduct business or make legal decisions without his permission. Your primary function is to produce male heirs, and your worth is directly tied to your fertility. If you fail to become pregnant, it's automatically assumed to be your fault, regardless of any medical realities. Childbirth in medieval times is a death lottery with terrible odds. There's no prenatal care, no understanding of hygiene during delivery, no pain relief, and no medical intervention when complications arise. Midwives do their best with limited knowledge and primitive tools, but even minor complications can result in death for mother, child, or both. Many women survive multiple pregnancies, but many others don't survive their first. If you do survive childbirth, your responsibilities multiply exponentially. You're now expected to nurse and care for an infant while continuing all your previous duties. Cooking, cleaning, spinning wool, tending animals and working in the fields. There's no maternity leave, no help with childcare, no recognition that you've just performed one of the most dangerous acts possible in medieval times. The domestic workload for medieval women is staggering. You're responsible for food preparation, which involves not just cooking but also food preservation, brewing beer, baking bread and managing household supplies. You must spin wool into thread, weave thread into cloth and sew cloth into clothing for your entire family. You tend to sick family members with no medical training, manage household finances with no resources, and maintain the home while also working in the fields during planting and harvest seasons. If you remain unmarried, you become a social anomaly and potential threat. Unmarried women are viewed with suspicion and often accused of witchcraft, especially if they possess any knowledge of herbs, healing, or other skills that might be considered supernatural. The line between helpful village-wise woman and dangerous witch is thin, and often depends more on local politics than actual behaviour. Widowhood brings its own unique vulnerabilities. Without a husband's protection, you become prey for unscrupulous men who might try to steal your property, force you into unwanted marriages, or simply take advantage of your defenseless position. The legal system offers little protection for women, and social customs often leave widows dependent on the charity of relatives or the church. The threat of sexual violence is constant and largely unaddressed by medieval law. Rape is often treated as a property crime against the woman's father or husband, rather than a crime against the woman herself. If you're assaulted, you may be blamed for tempting your attacker or failing to resist sufficiently. The concept of consent is poorly understood, and women's testimony is generally considered less reliable than men's. Even within the church, women's roles are severely restricted. While becoming a nun might offer some escape from marriage and childbearing, convent life comes with its own forms of oppression. Nuns live under strict rules that govern every aspect of their behaviour, from when they can speak to how they can move. Their spiritual worth is always considered secondary to that of male clergy, and they have no voice in church governance or doctrine. The clothing requirements for medieval women add another layer of discomfort to daily life. You're expected to cover your body completely, regardless of weather or working conditions. Long skirts make physical labour more difficult and dangerous, while head coverings can impair vision and hearing. The clothing itself is heavy, restrictive, and designed more for modesty than functionality. Women's knowledge and skills are often dismissed or appropriated by men. If you develop expertise in healing, cooking, or other domestic arts, that knowledge is rarely valued or compensated. If your skills become too prominent or successful, you risk being accused of witchcraft or other supernatural practices. The legal system treats women as perpetual minors who cannot represent themselves in court, own property independently, or make binding contracts. If you're accused of a crime, you have fewer legal protections than men and are more likely to face harsh punishments. The justice system assumes that women are naturally deceitful and morally weak, making fair treatment unlikely. Pregnancy and menstruation are treated as shameful conditions that make women spiritually unclean. You're expected to hide these natural biological processes and may be excluded from religious ceremonies or social gatherings during certain times. The lack of understanding about women's health means that normal biological functions are often treated as diseases or moral failings. The psychological toll of living as a woman in medieval times is immense. You're constantly reminded of your inferior status, your limited options, and your dependence on male protection. Every aspect of your life is controlled by others, and you have virtually Despite no these overwhelming agency challenges, over your own medieval destiny. women found ways to exercise influence, whatever maintain dignity within the constraints of their society.
Natural,
They form networks of
ordained.
mutual support, passed down knowledge through generations, and sometimes managed to carve out small spaces of autonomy within the rigid social structure. But these victories were hard-won and constantly threatened by the oppressive systems that governed medieval life. Chapter 13. Violence as a Way of Life, Crime and Punishment. Just when you think your medieval day couldn't possibly get worse, you encounter the casual brutality that permeates every aspect of medieval society. Violence in the Middle Ages isn't an aberration or a breakdown of social order. It is the social order. From domestic disputes to international conflicts, from petty crimes to religious disagreements, violence is the primary method of resolving conflicts and maintaining control. The concept of law and order in medieval times is more accurately described as hope the local lord isn't having a bad day. Justice is arbitrary, punishment is brutal, and the legal system is designed more to demonstrate power than to protect citizens or maintain fairness. If you're accused of a crime, your fate depends less on evidence or legal procedure than on your social status, your relationship with local authorities, and pure luck. Petty crimes carry punishments that would horrify modern sensibilities. Steal a loaf of bread to feed your starving family, and you could lose a hand. The logic is simple. If you steal with your hands, you lose your hands. This approach to justice is both literal and permanent, ensuring that your punishment follows you for the rest of your life as a visible reminder of your transgression. Lying or spreading gossip can result in having your tongue pierced or being forced to wear a scold's bridle, a metal contraption that fits over your head with a bar that goes in your mouth to prevent speech. This device is not just painful but humiliating, marking you as someone who can't be trusted to control their words. You might be forced to wear it in public for days or weeks, serving as entertainment for your neighbours and a warning to others. The medieval justice system has a particular fondness for trial by ordeal, a method of determining guilt or innocence. If your hand heals without infection within 3 days, evidence or logic. If it becomes infected, which it almost certainly will, you're guilty and subject to additional pot of boiling water. Another charming option is trial by water, where you're thrown into a river or pond. If you sink, you're innocent and probably dead from drowning. If you float, you're guilty and will be executed anyway. It's like a medieval game show where the host is actively rooting against you and all the prizes involve death or dismemberment. Public executions are major social events that draw crowds like modern sporting events. Hangings, beheadings and burnings are performed in town squares with spectators bringing food and treating the proceedings as entertainment. Children attend these events as part of their education, learning early that violence is not just acceptable but celebrated when sanctioned by authority. The methods of execution are designed to be both painful and public. Hanging is considered a relatively merciful death, reserved for common criminals. Beheading is for nobility, since it's quick and doesn't involve the prolonged suffering that's considered appropriate for lower classes. Burning is reserved for heretics and witches, ensuring maximum pain and serving as a warning to others who might consider challenging religious authority. Domestic violence is not just tolerated but legally sanctioned. Husbands are expected to discipline their wives and children, and the law provides guidelines for how much violence is appropriate. A husband can beat his wife as long as the stick he uses is no thicker than his thumb, the origin of the phrase rule of thumb. This isn't considered abuse. It's considered proper household management. Street violence is commonplace and often goes unpunished. You can be beaten simply for looking at a noble's horse the wrong way, for walking on the wrong side of the street, or for no reason at all if someone more powerful than you is having a bad day. The concept of equal protection under the law doesn't exist when the law itself is designed to protect the powerful and control the weak. Warfare is a constant presence in medieval life, whether through local feuds, territorial disputes, or religious crusades. Someone is always marching off to kill someone else in the name of armies honor, passing God, through your area might requisition your crops, even if you're not directly involved in fighting. Military service. Wars affect food supplies, weapons of trade medieval warfare, and local security to cause maximum damage and suffering. Swords, axes, maces and crossbows are crafted not just to kill but to maim and terrorize. Battle tactics often involve deliberate cruelty, such as catapulting diseased corpses into besieged cities or poisoning water supplies. Legal proceedings themselves are often violent affairs. Torture is routinely used to extract confessions, and the methods are limited only by the imagination and sadism of the interrogators. The rack, thumbscrews, and red-hot pincers are standard tools of medieval justice, used not just on the guilty but on anyone suspected of wrongdoing. The psychological impact of living in such a violent society cannot be overstated. You develop a constant awareness that your life could end suddenly and brutally at any moment. Every interaction carries the potential for violence. Every disagreement could escalate to bloodshed, and every day you survive is a small victory against overwhelming odds. Violence in medieval times isn't just a tool of control, it's a form of entertainment, a method of education, and a way of life. You don't just witness violence, you participate in it, celebrate it, and accept it as the natural order of things. The alternative, questioning the system that produces such brutality, is itself a form of violence against the established order, and will be punished accordingly. Chapter 14, the final chapter. Death in medieval times. As your brutal medieval day draws to a close, it's worth reflecting on how that day and indeed your entire life is likely to end. Death in medieval Europe isn't a distant concern to be contemplated in old age. It's an immediate and constant presence that shapes every decision and colours every moment of existence. If you've managed to survive to the age of 40 in medieval times, you're essentially a walking miracle. The average life expectancy hovers around 30 to 35 years, but this number is heavily skewed by catastrophic infant mortality rates. Nearly half of all children born don't live to see their 5th birthday, victims of disease, malnutrition, accidents, or simply the harsh realities of medieval life. The causes of death in medieval times read like a catalogue of human suffering. Disease is the primary killer, with plague, dysentery, typhoid, and countless other ailments sweeping through communities with devastating regularity. The Black Death alone killed an estimated 1/3 of Europe's population in the 14th century, but it was just the most famous of many epidemics that regularly decimated medieval communities. Starvation is another common cause of death, particularly during the frequent famines that result from crop failures, warfare, or simply bad weather. When food becomes scarce, the weakest members of society, children, the elderly, and the poor, are the first to die. Entire villages can be wiped out during particularly severe famines, leaving behind only empty houses and overgrown fields. For women, childbirth represents one of the greatest threats to survival. Without modern medical knowledge or intervention, complications during delivery frequently result in death for mother, child, or both. Many women who survive multiple pregnancies are left permanently damaged by the experience, suffering from infections, internal injuries, or other complications that slowly kill them over months or years. Accidents are another major cause of death in a world without safety regulations or protective equipment. Farm workers are crushed by livestock, fall from heights, or are injured by primitive tools. Fires regularly destroy entire neighborhoods, trapping residents in wooden buildings with no escape routes. Drowning is common in a world where few people know how to swim, and water transportation is dangerous. Violence accounts for a significant portion of medieval deaths. Wars, feuds, criminal activity and domestic violence all take their toll on the population. Even minor disputes can escalate to deadly violence in a society where weapons are common and legal protections are minimal. The process of dying in medieval times is often prolonged and agonizing. Without effective pain management or medical intervention, people suffer through illnesses and injuries that would be easily treatable today. Families watch helplessly as loved ones waste away from diseases they can't understand or prevent. Funeral practices in medieval times reflect the harsh realities of life and death. Bodies are buried quickly to prevent the spread of disease, often in shallow graves that may be disturbed by animals or weather. Elaborate funeral ceremonies are reserved for the wealthy. Most people are buried with minimal ceremony and quickly forgotten. The psychological impact of living with constant death cannot be understated. Medieval people develop a fatalistic acceptance of mortality that shapes their worldview and behaviour. They don't plan for the future because the future is uncertain. They don't invest in long-term projects because they may not live to see them completed. Religious beliefs about death and the afterlife provide some comfort, but also add another layer of anxiety to medieval life. The Church teaches that death is just the beginning of an eternal journey that could lead to paradise or damnation. This means that how you die and the state of your soul at the time of death determines your fate for eternity. The concept of a good death becomes central to medieval thinking. A good death involves proper preparation, confession of sins, receipt of last rites, and ideally the presence of family and clergy. Sudden death is feared not just because it's unexpected, but because it doesn't allow for proper spiritual preparation. Children in medieval times are exposed to death from an early age. They attend public executions, witness the deaths of siblings and relatives, and learn to accept mortality as a natural part of life. This early exposure to death shapes their understanding of life's fragility and the importance of spiritual preparation. The economic impact of death on medieval families is devastating. When the primary breadwinner dies, the entire family may face starvation or homelessness. There are no life insurance policies, no social safety nets, no government assistance programs. Death doesn't just end a life. It often destroys entire families. Despite the constant presence of death, medieval people find ways to celebrate life and maintain hope. They create art, tell stories, fall in love, and build communities. They develop rituals and traditions that help them cope with loss and find meaning in suffering. But these moments of joy and beauty exist against a backdrop of constant mortality that gives them both urgency and poignancy. Chapter 15, The Myth Shattered, reflecting on medieval reality. As we reach the end of our journey through a single day in medieval Europe, it's worth reflecting on how dramatically different the reality was from the romanticized version that popular culture has sold us. The Middle Ages weren't a time of noble knights and fair maidens, of chivalrous quests and courtly love. They were a brutal, unforgiving period when simply surviving another day was an achievement worthy of celebration. The medieval world we've explored today was one of constant discomfort, perpetual danger, and limited opportunities. From the moment you woke up in your flea-infested bed until you fell asleep exhausted from a day of back-breaking labour, every aspect of life was a struggle against forces largely beyond your control. The romantic image of medieval life, castles and tournaments, troubadours and courtly romance, represents the experience of perhaps 1% of the population. For the vast majority of people, medieval life was about survival, not adventure. It was about enduring pain, not seeking glory. It was about accepting your place in a rigid social hierarchy, not pursuing your dreams or ambitions. The technological limitations of medieval life created challenges that are difficult for modern people to comprehend. Without electricity, running water, modern medicine or efficient transportation, even the simplest tasks required enormous effort and carried significant risks. A minor cut could become a fatal infection, and a bad harvest could mean starvation, and a harsh winter could kill entire families. The social structures of medieval Europe were designed to maintain stability and order, but they did so at the cost of individual freedom and opportunity. The feudal system created a rigid hierarchy where your birth determined your destiny, and social mobility was virtually impossible. If you were born a peasant, you died a peasant, and your children would be peasants after you. The role of religion in medieval life was both comforting and oppressive. While faith provided hope for a better afterlife and community support during difficult times, it also imposed strict controls on behaviour and thought. The Church's power was absolute, and questioning religious authority could result in excommunication, torture, or death. Women in medieval society faced additional layers of oppression that made their lives even more challenging than those of men. They had fewer rights, fewer opportunities, and were subject to male authority throughout their lives. The idealized image of the medieval lady in her tower bears no resemblance to the reality of most women's lives, which were defined by hard work, frequent childbearing, and constant vulnerability. The violence that permeated medieval society was both casual and systematic. Public executions were entertainment, domestic violence was legal, and warfare was constant. The legal system was designed more to demonstrate power than to ensure justice, and punishments were deliberately brutal to serve as deterrents. Yet despite all these hardships, medieval people found ways to create meaning, beauty, and community within the constraints of their harsh world. They built magnificent cathedrals, created beautiful art, developed complex philosophical and theological systems, and maintained family and community bonds that helped them endure unimaginable hardships. The resilience of medieval people is perhaps their most admirable quality. They faced challenges that would break most modern individuals, yet they persevered, adapted, and even thrived within the limitations of their world. They developed a stoicism and acceptance that allowed them to find joy in small pleasures and meaning in suffering. Understanding the reality of medieval life helps us appreciate the progress that humanity has made over the centuries. The comforts and freedoms we take for granted today, clean water, effective medicine, education, social mobility, human rights, are recent developments in human history. They represent the accumulated efforts of countless generations who worked to improve the human condition. The medieval period also reminds us how fragile our modern comforts really are. The systems that provide us with food, water, shelter, and security require constant maintenance and can be disrupted by natural disasters, economic collapse, or social upheaval. The medieval world shows us what life looks like when these systems fail or never existed in the first place. Perhaps most importantly, studying medieval life helps us understand the true cost of progress. The freedoms and opportunities we enjoy today were built on the suffering and sacrifice of countless individuals who lived and died in circumstances we can barely imagine. Every advance in medicine, technology, and human rights represents a victory over the kind of suffering that defined medieval existence. The medieval period also demonstrates the importance of questioning authority and challenging established systems. The rigid hierarchies and oppressive institutions that characterize medieval society persisted partly because people accepted them as natural and unchangeable. Progress came only when individuals and groups began to question these assumptions and work for change. Modern complaints about inconvenience, discomfort, or social problems take on a different perspective when viewed against the backdrop of medieval life. While contemporary issues are real and deserve attention, the scale of suffering and limitation that defined medieval existence puts our current challenges in context. The technological revolution that has transformed human life over the past few centuries represents one of the most dramatic changes in human history. In just a few hundred years, we've moved from a world where most people lived lives of grinding poverty and constant danger, to one where even the poorest members of developed societies have access to resources and opportunities that medieval kings could never have imagined. Yet the medieval period also reminds us that human nature itself hasn't changed dramatically. Medieval people experienced the same emotions, desires, and needs that we do today. They loved their families, sought meaning in their lives, and tried to create better futures for their children. The difference lies not in human nature, but in the circumstances and opportunities available to them. The study of medieval life also highlights the importance of institutions and systems in shaping human experience. The difference between medieval suffering and modern comfort isn't primarily due to individual virtue or effort, but to the development of better institutions, technologies, and social systems. This understanding should make us both grateful for what we have and committed to protecting and improving the systems that make modern life possible. Lessons from the Dark Ages. As we conclude our journey through a single day in medieval Europe, we're left with a profound appreciation for both how far humanity has come and how precarious our progress really is. The medieval world we've explored wasn't just different from our own, it was almost incomprehensibly harsh, offering daily reminders that life is fragile, comfort is rare, and survival is never guaranteed. The men and women who lived through these times weren't fundamentally different from us. They had the same capacity for love, creativity, and hope that we do today. What made their lives so difficult wasn't any failing on their part, but the absence of the knowledge, technology, and institutions that we now take for granted. Every time you turn on a tap and clean water flows out, remember the medieval peasant who risked death with every sip. When you visit a doctor and receive effective treatment, think of the medieval patient subjected to bloodletting and torture in the name of healing. When you enjoy a varied, nutritious meal, consider the medieval family subsisting on pottage and hope. The progress we've made isn't just about technology or medicine, it's about the gradual recognition of human dignity and the development of systems that protect and nurture that dignity. The concept that all people deserve basic rights, opportunities, and protections is a relatively recent development in human history, and one that medieval people could barely have imagined. Yet our exploration of medieval life also serves as a warning. The institutions and systems that protect us from medieval-style suffering are not permanent or inevitable. They require constant maintenance, protection, and improvement. History shows us that progress can be reversed, that civilizations can collapse, and that the hard-won advances of centuries can be lost in a generation. The medieval period reminds us to be grateful for what we have while remaining vigilant about protecting it. It teaches us that human suffering is not inevitable, that progress is possible, and that each generation has the responsibility to build a better world for those who come after. Perhaps most importantly, understanding medieval life helps us develop empathy for those who still live in conditions of poverty, oppression, and suffering. While we may no longer face the specific challenges of medieval Europe, millions of people around the world still lack access to clean water, adequate food, effective medicine, and basic human rights. The medieval world isn't just history. It's a reminder of what life looks like when these fundamental needs aren't met. As you return to your modern life with its countless comforts and opportunities, carry with you the memory of that medieval peasant struggling through another day of survival. Let their suffering inspire your gratitude, their resilience inspire your strength, and their humanity inspire your compassion for all those who still struggle against overwhelming odds. The Dark Ages may be behind us, but the light we live in today was kindled by countless individuals who refused to accept that suffering and limitation were humanity's permanent fate. We are the beneficiaries of their struggles, and we have the responsibility to ensure that the light continues to shine for future generations. In the end, our journey through medieval life isn't just about understanding the past, it's about appreciating the present and building a better future. The medieval world shows us where we've been, but more importantly, it reminds us how far we can go when we refuse to accept that things must always be as they are. The next time you complain about a minor inconvenience or take for granted a basic comfort, remember the medieval peasant who would have considered your worst day a miraculous gift. Remember that you live in an age of wonders that they could never have imagined, and that with that privilege comes the responsibility to use it wisely. The medieval world is gone, but its lessons remain. In understanding their suffering, we better appreciate our blessings. In recognizing their humanity, we better understand our own. And in learning from their struggles, we better prepare ourselves to face whatever challenges the future may bring. This is the true legacy of the medieval period, not the romantic myths of knights and castles, but the hard-won wisdom that comes from understanding what human life looks like at its most challenging, and the inspiration that comes from seeing how people can endure, adapt, and ultimately transcend even the most difficult circumstances. The Dark Ages may have ended, but their memory serves as both a warning and a promise. A warning of what we could lose if we're not careful, and a promise of what we can achieve when we refuse to accept that suffering and limitation are humanity's permanent fate. This documentary has taken us through the harsh realities of medieval life, stripping away romantic notions to reveal the brutal truth of daily existence in the Middle Ages. From the moment of waking in a flea-infested hovel to the constant threat of death from disease, violence, or starvation, medieval life was a relentless struggle for survival that few of us could endure today. Yet understanding this period helps us appreciate not only how far we've come, but also how precious and fragile our modern comforts truly are. We hope that you are already at sleep. If not, consider playing our History for Sleep playlist. And of course, please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done. Tell us in the comments on what subject you would like to hear more History for Sleep, and where you are at the moment and what time it is. Medieval winter survival, the daily battle against death. When you think of medieval life, you might picture knights in shining armour, grand feasts and romantic castles. But for the average peasant, which made up about 90% of the population, winter wasn't a season of cosy fireplaces and warm meals. It was an annual test of survival that determined who would see spring and who wouldn't. Picture this: you're living in a tiny hut made of mud, sticks and animal dung. The walls are so thin you can hear every gust of wind, every animal moving outside. There's no insulation, no glass windows, just a small hole covered with animal skin if you're lucky. The inside temperature of your home is maybe just a few degrees warmer than the freezing air outside. Medieval peasant homes were built using what historians call wattle and daub construction. Imagine a giant basket made of crisscrossed sticks, then smeared with a mixture of mud, straw and, yes, animal dung. The dung wasn't added to be gross, it was actually a cheap sticky insulator that was always readily available. But these walls, no matter how carefully constructed, stood little chance against a proper winter storm, the architecture of survival. These homes weren't just drafty, they were essentially wind tunnels with roofs. The cold found every crack, every gap, and danced its way inside, making sure you never got too comfortable. Privacy? Absolutely not. Warmth? Barely. Character building? Definitely. The roofs were made of thatch, bundles of straw or reed that looked picturesque but leaked constantly. After months of rain and snow, they sagged and occasionally let in local wildlife. Nothing says pleasant evening like a squirrel dropping onto your dinner. Windows, if they existed at all, were tiny holes covered with animal hides or wooden shutters. Glass was so expensive that even lords could barely afford it. Peasants were just happy if the wind didn't rip the cowhide covering right off the wall during a blizzard. The floors were often just compacted dirt. When it rained heavily, mud seeped up through the ground, creating indoor water features that nobody appreciated. In winter, every step inside your own home felt like trudging across a frozen marsh. Cold from below, cold from above, cold from all sides. The battle against ground frost. Medieval peasants faced a silent enemy rising from below, the frozen ground itself. Floors weren't really floors, they were just slightly flatter patches of earth inside your home. Maybe someone had thrown down some straw to give the illusion of comfort, but you were essentially sleeping one thin layer away from the frozen dirt. The cold seeped up from the earth like an evil spirit, worming through the straw into your bones. If you dropped anything during a winter night, congratulations. It was now part of the permafrost. Peasants tried to fight this battle by layering thick mats of straw across the floor, but straw flattened quickly and got mouldy even faster. Some homes used dried rushes instead, throwing fresh ones on top without cleaning out the old ones. Over time, this created a fascinating ecosystem of decomposing plants, fleas, and mystery creatures. It was basically medieval carpet padding. if your carpet was alive, damp, and smelled like a wet dog. The sacred fire. Heart of survival. If medieval homes had a single hero during winter, it was the hearth, not a fancy fireplace with a stone mantle, but a simple fire pit or pile of stones with some half-burned logs and enough smoke to make you wonder if you were slowly becoming a ham. Most homes didn't even have chimneys. Smoke just drifted out through holes in the roof, cracks in the walls, or directly into your lungs. It wasn't ideal for breathing, but it did fumigate fleas and other pests. Who needs pest control when you're marinating in smoke 24/7? The hearth wasn't just about warmth. It was the kitchen, the light source, and the medieval equivalent of television. People gathered around it telling stories, gossiping, or just staring into the flames because there wasn't much else to do after sunset. Keeping the fire alive wasn't optional, it was mandatory. Letting it die meant death. Reigniting a fire in winter without matches or lighters meant striking flint and steel together, praying for a spark and coddling that spark with whatever dry kindling you hadn't already burned. The art of fire. Banking medieval peasants developed the crucial skill of banking the fire. This meant carefully burying the embers under ash before bed. The ash acted like a blanket, keeping the coals alive until morning. If done right, you could poke the pile at sunrise, add fresh wood, and have fire without frostbite. But if you did it wrong, mornings got much colder and grumpier. Fire banking was an art passed down from parent to child, with everyone having their own secrets. Some said use dry ash only. Others insisted dampness was key. You could start a medieval argument just by suggesting a better fire banking method. Sometimes families took turns getting up during the night to check the coals. The medieval equivalent of checking the thermostat. Because if you woke up to even a single surviving ember, that was victory enough to face another day. Human heat, the power of bodies. When fire wasn't enough, medieval peasants had another heat source, each other. The phrase, the more the merrier, wasn't about parties, it was a survival tactic. On the coldest nights, entire households piled into the warmest corner, forming what could best be described as a desperate, snoring human lasagna. Forget personal space, it didn't exist. Younger kids squeezed between parents, grandparents took the outer layers, and if Cousin Ethelred showed up unexpectedly, there was always room for one more. If you were lucky, you got the middle where body heat radiated from all sides. If unlucky, you were on the edge, the medieval equivalent of sleeping next to a meat locker door. Sometimes even bedding was shared, a communal straw mattress that slowly flattened under multiple generations. Because hygiene wasn't winning awards back then, it wasn't the most fragrant arrangement, but when it's you versus frostbite, you stop being picky. Body heat was strategic. Medieval guides recommended arranging the strongest, warmest people on the outside, like human shields against the cold. Babies and elderly were tucked in the centre, treated like the precious heat generators they were. Living with livestock medieval peasants had some unusual roommates. Cows, goats, pigs, chickens, basically anything with a pulse and body heat. Bringing animals indoors wasn't quirky. It was vital for survival. Livestock generated warmth, and in a poorly insulated hovel, every degree mattered. At night, houses became chaotic living furnaces. Chickens nested in corners, pigs snorted near the hearth, and cows lounged against walls. chewing cud like they paid rent. The smells were legendary. By spring, your home had a perfume that was something fierce. Certain animals had prime spots. Cows, being biggest and warmest, took centre stage. Goats were allowed closer for warmth, and because they'd find their way inside anyway. Chickens roosted in rafters, and pigs plopped down wherever they pleased. Of course, sharing your bedroom with livestock had hazards. Imagine being awakened by a chicken deciding your hair makes a good perch, or stepping barefoot into something suspicious first thing in the morning. Medieval mornings were full of surprises. Despite the noise, smells and occasional hoof to the ribs, peasants understood the math. Cold kills and cows cuddle whether they want to or not. Medieval clothing and survival strategies. Medieval fashion, survival over style. In medieval winters, fashion wasn't about looking good. It was about not dying. Peasants layered up like they were preparing for battle against the Grim Reaper. The rule was simple. If you owned it, you wore it, sometimes all at once. First came the basic undertunic, a scratchy, probably not too clean linen shirt. Over that, a thicker woolen tunic, then another if you had it. Add sagging leggings, a rough cloak, and, if you were really lucky, a patched sheepskin thrown on top. Congratulations, you were now 10% warmer and 90% itchier. Boots were luxury items. Many peasants wrapped their feet in layers of cloth or rags and stuffed them into wooden clogs. If cold still bit through, you added another rag and hoped you didn't lose a toe. Washing clothes in winter meant dragging them to a frozen stream, smashing through ice and waiting days for your only shirt to dry, if it didn't freeze into a tragic shirt cycle. Most peasants decided that smelling like smoke, sweat and sheep was better than freezing solid. The strategic value of dirt. Here's something that might surprise you. In medieval times, dirt wasn't just something you scrubbed off, it was a survival tool. Getting grimy wasn't giving up on life. It was tactical. Clean clothes, especially freshly laundered linen, were terrible at keeping you warm. They were breathable, but when air temperature hovered between hypothermia and instant regret, breathable wasn't helpful. As peasants went days without washing, layers of grime, body oils and mud built up on their clothes. This natural armour clogged tiny gaps in fabric, making clothes more wind-resistant. It was medieval weatherproofing, just smellier. Some medieval folks believed washing too often in winter could make you sick. Better to keep that protective filth barrier intact. Bathing was rare, laundry even rarer, and soap was reserved for serious occasions like when the bishop visited. Peasants layered clothes without changing underneath ones. You threw new layers on top of last month's. Eventually you became a walking museum of the past 6 weeks, every stain telling a heroic story. Medieval bedding, sleeping on dead plants. If you thought medieval peasants had plush feather beds, think again. Beds were usually rough wooden frames covered with sacks stuffed full of straw, hay or old rushes. No memory foam, no orthopaedic support, just a crunchy, lumpy, pokey mess that smelled of barnyard and regret. Every toss and turn brought delightful crinkling sounds and occasional sharp jabs from rogue storks. Some peasants skipped wooden frames entirely and threw straw straight onto dirt floors. The medieval version of earth-connected slumber. Straw mattresses weren't just uncomfortable, they were temporary. Over time, straw flattened, grew mouldy and attracted bugs. Changing it was a big event, done a few times yearly or whenever your bed started moving without permission. Rushes were popular alternatives, long grasses spread thick on floors, sometimes mixed with herbs like lavender to mask overwhelming livestock aromas. Fresh rushes smelled lovely for about a day, then became part of the muddy, trampled landscape inside the house. And let's not forget the bedfellows. Fleas, lice and other creatures loved straw bedding. If you woke up scratching more than sleeping, you were living the authentic medieval experience. Sealing the gaps. Medieval weatherproofing. When you live in a house made of sticks, mud and optimism, winter breezes aren't just nuisances, they're personal attacks. Medieval peasants fought cold from inside their own homes, armed with whatever they could cram into cracks. Walls warped, mud crumbled, thatch sagged. Cold found new places to sneak in every night like a mischievous poltergeist. Sealing up became an art form. Peasants stuffed gaps with moss, straw, cloth scraps, dry grass and animal hair. If it was soft and insulating, it went into a hole somewhere. Some determined souls daubed extra mud and dung over outside walls as annual winter projects. Imagine standing in freezing weather, slapping cold manure onto your house while muttering, "This is fine, this is luxury." Because in a way it was. Roof leaks were another battlefield. Thatch wasn't waterproof, especially after seasons of rain and snow. Peasants plugged holes with spare cloth, reed bundles, or chunks of turf stolen from nearby fields. Every home looked like a sad patchwork quilt made by someone who gave up halfway through. Sleeping in shifts, the night watch. When cold bites hard enough to keep you awake, medieval peasants had a solution. Don't pretend everyone's sleeping at once. Instead, they developed sleeping in shifts. Half the household stayed awake tending fire and patching drafts, while the other half tried to catch a few hours of half-frozen sleep. The fire needed constant attention. Left alone, it would die, and restarting it was nearly impossible. So someone had to be on ember patrol. Families rotated shifts. You dozed for a few hours, got elbowed awake, then stumbled to the hearth to poke and curse the fire back to life. The rotation wasn't glamorous. No night vision goggles, no snacks, no snooze buttons, just stiff joints, heavy eyelids and growing resentment toward whoever snored loudest during your shift. Children old enough to hold sticks were pressed into service, learning early that everyone pulled their weight or froze trying. When it was your turn to sleep, good luck. People moved about, animals rustled, wind battered walls, and siblings accidentally rolled over too hard. Getting quality rest was a miracle, yet the system worked. Sleeping in shifts meant there were always eyes and hands ready to keep the hearth alive. The embers survived, and by extension so did the family. Breathing to survive. Medieval peasants even adjusted how they breathed to stay alive. Deep, open-mouthed breathing pulled icy air straight into lungs. In a world where pneumonia could kill faster than you could say, "Hail Mary," that was dangerous. Peasants learned survival breathing, shallow, slow through the nose. The idea was gently warming incoming air before it hit lungs. It wasn't perfect, but better than coughing yourself into the grave by February. Some people tucked parts of cloaks or rags over their faces while sleeping, creating makeshift breath-warmer barriers. Of course, this meant waking up with damp, soggy fabric clinging to your mouth, but it beat freezing from the inside out. Children learned these tricks early. Parents scolded little ones for panting like dogs indoors during cold months. Between strict breathing lessons, itchy wool layers, and sleeping next to gassy goats, medieval childhood winters were character building on a whole different level. The power of a full stomach. Medieval peasants discovered that one of the best ways to fight cold wasn't another scratchy cloak. It was stuffing yourself with something hearty before bed. Calories meant warmth. The more your body had to digest, the more it heated itself up. What did peasants pile onto plates before freezing nights? Think thick stews heavy with root vegetables like turnips, onions and parsnips. Grains were lifesavers. Oat porridge, barley gruel, dense rye bread. If lucky, you might get salted pork or dried sausage thrown into the pot. The power of a full stomach continued. £7,800, £8,200. This wasn't Instagram comfort food with delicate presentation. It was one enormous, vaguely brown meal designed to sit in your gut like a friendly brick, slowly burning through the night and keeping you warmer. It wasn't just about eating a lot, it was about eating smart. Foods that took longer to digest provided slow, steady warmth. Fatty foods were particularly prized because fat burns slower than lean meat. A belly full of stew, bread and questionable amounts of lard was peak medieval winter luxury. Parents made sure even picky children ate heartily. Nobody cared if little Thomas didn't like turnips. You ate the turnips or shivered through the night thinking about how much you missed them. Harsh but effective medieval parenting. Heavy nighttime eating came with hazards. You might be warmer, but you risked vivid, bizarre dreams fueled by a stomach desperately processing an entire field's worth of cabbages. Was it worth it? Absolutely. Medieval heating technology, stones and hay. Long before electric blankets, medieval peasants got creative with heated stones and hay boxes. The hay box was pure genius. Peasants took sturdy wooden boxes, lined them with hay, and used them to store cooked food, keeping it warm for hours. Medieval slow cookers, basically, but they didn't stop at food. If hay could trap heat from a stew pot, it could trap heat from something better. Rocks. Enter the era of the heated stone. Before bed, someone to you, probably whichever child lost the family argument, would grab a flat stone and chuck it into the hearth fire. After roasting until nearly too hot to touch, they'd fish it out using sticks or old tongs. The stone, still radiating warmth, would be wrapped in rags and slipped under hay in the mattress or down at the foot of the bed. Of course, there were risks. Wrap the stone improperly and congratulations, you now had a small house fire. Drop it on your foot and winter injuries weren't always from slipping on ice. But when everything went right, that stone provided precious warmth lasting for hours. Strategic sleeping arrangements. In medieval homes, the hearth wasn't just where you cooked, it was practically a family member. Sleeping arrangements were less about personal preference and more about strategic positioning for survival. Infants, elderly, and anyone sick got first dibs on prime real estate near the fire. Parents and older kids fanned out from there like human insulation layers. Being assigned a spot close to fire wasn't just kindness, it was survival math. But it wasn't all cosy toasting. Too close and you risked waking up with singed hair or smouldering cloaks. Too far and you were camping in an icebox. It was a delicate dance. Stay near enough to bask in fire's glow, but not so near you looked like half-cooked roast. Fire didn't spread warmth evenly. It mostly roasted people directly in front, while everyone else fought over the narrow cone of heat like cold lizards jostling for sunbeam. If you fell asleep facing the fire, you might have one warm side and one frozen solid. Pets and livestock muscled in too. Dogs wedged between you and fire, tails wagging dangerously close to flames. Chickens perched on hearthstones, clucking softly like tiny, feathery guardians of warmth. Village survival networks. In the medieval world, no one survived winter alone unless they wanted to become a stylish, frozen statue by January. Survival wasn't just a family affair, it was a village project. And a messy, muddy collaboration where everyone's life depended on everyone else. Villages had unofficial winter watchers, often young or elderly who couldn't work fields but could keep eyes on who was coughing too hard, who hadn't come to market in days, or whose home looked too still in morning frost. These were medieval neighbourhood patrol, minus reflective vests, plus lots more sheep. If a family's fire went out, it was near emergency. Good neighbours rushed over with glowing coals bundled in rags, or better yet, invited them into their own smoky, overcrowded huts for the night. Yes, it meant squeezing extra bodies into cramped spaces, but it was better than finding frozen friends come spring thaw. Communal food stores played vital roles. During brutal winters, villages sometimes pooled last salted meat, grain and dried vegetables. It was grim charity, and no one had much, but few communal meals could mean the difference between staggering into spring or not. Even children understood stakes. They helped deliver wood, shared embers, and ran urgent messages when someone needed help. No one was too small or tired when winter came knocking. Faith as winter armour. When medieval peasants faced merciless cold, they didn't just pile on cloaks or stoke fires. They prayed. A lot. When wind howled like wolves outside paper-thin walls and fire shrank into sullen embers, you wanted every possible advantage, including divine intervention. Faith wasn't just Sunday affair, it was woven into every frozen breath. Before crawling under layers of straw and scratchy wool, families knelt together, offering hurried prayers to keep fire burning, roof intact and toes attached by mourning. Saints became winter's frontline defence. Saint Blaise was called upon to protect against throat ailments, not minor concern when one mouthful of icy air could land you coughing up your soul. Saint Nicholas wasn't just jolly gift giver, but protector of households from sudden ruin during deadly months. Superstitions wrapped around daily survival. Some families sprinkled holy water near hearths before sleeping, hoping to protect against evil spirits or mischievous draughts. Others marked doorways with blessed chalk after feast days. The Lost Civilization of Caral. Introduction to Caral, the Forgotten First City. Now let's journey back even further in time, not just centuries, but millennia. Long before the towering pyramids of Giza, before Mesopotamian cities buzzed with life, before Stonehenge stood against the sky, there was Caral. Hidden in the dry valleys of coastal Peru, Caral rose in silent majesty nearly 5,000 years ago, then faded into complete oblivion, swallowed by sands and forgotten by history. For centuries, the world didn't even know it existed. The Soup Valley where Caral once thrived seems at first glance an unlikely place for civilization to bloom. The landscape is parched, barren, the river little more than a thin silver thread winding through rocks and dust. To most eyes it looked inhospitable, abandoned by life. Yet here, amid desolation, one of humanity's earliest great cities took shape. Caral wasn't just scattered huts or temporary trading post. It was a planned city sprawling over 150 acres, filled with pyramids, plazas, residential quarters and ceremonial spaces. It had scale, purpose and vision, a complex society blossoming centuries before Egyptians began stacking stones into their own pyramids. The people of Caral achieved this without the wheel, without written language, without metal tools. They built massive structures from stone and earth with nothing but ingenuity, communal effort, and raw power of human will. The hidden city emerges. For nearly 4,000 years, Caral remained hidden, a whisper beneath sands. Travellers passed strange, rounded hills dotting the landscape, never suspecting that beneath their feet lay ruins of a civilization older than Egypt's pyramids. To them, these were just natural formations, mounds shaped by wind and time. It wasn't until the 1990s that Peruvian archaeologist Ruth Shady led a team into the Soup Valley, driven by curiosity and growing sense that these hills might hold secrets no one had uncovered. What they found would rewrite the story of human civilization in the Americas. Layer by painstaking layer, sand was brushed away. Beneath emerged walls of carefully cut stone, grand staircases, sunken plazas, pyramids. A city far older than anyone imagined. Radiocarbon dating confirmed the unbelievable. Caral was over 4,600 years old, thriving at the same time as earliest civilizations in Mesopotamia and Egypt. Before Caral, scholars believe civilization in the Americas developed much later, shadowed by great empires of the Old World. Caral changed everything. It proved the Americas had birthed monumental architecture, complex urban life and social organization independently, long before rise of Incas or Maya. Ruth Shady and her team found not just stone and rubble, but remnants of life. Musical instruments, fishing nets, textiles, quipu, ancient knot records, bentum, and offerings made to gods. Each artifact told stories of people who had built society with vision, intelligence, and profound creativity. Mastering the desert, Caral's environmental triumph. At first glance, the Soup Valley looks like a place where life should struggle to exist. Harsh winds sweep across endless stretches of sand and stone. Sun beats down mercilessly, drying earth into cracked, brittle sheets. Water is scarce. The river a meandering thread fighting for survival. But the people of Caral saw something different. They didn't see desert to be feared, they saw canvas to be shaped. They recognized the river, however modest, as lifeblood of possibility. With patience, ingenuity and determination, they turned this unforgiving place into a thriving oasis of life and culture. Their first victory was agriculture. They learned to tame the river's seasonal floods, building brilliant irrigation systems that channeled water across valley floors. Where others saw sand and dust, they coaxed green shoots of hope. Cotton, beans, squash, guava, sweet potatoes. Cotton became their treasure, spun into fishing nets and textiles, fueling trade with coastal villages and creating bonds stretching far beyond their desert home. But growing crops was only part of their mastery. The people of Caral understood that survival in desert required balance. They worked with nature, not against it. They built homes and plazas from stone and earth designed to withstand both scorching heat and rare, punishing rains that occasionally swept through valleys. They studied stars and seasons, planning harvests with precision of master astronomers. Trade became the veins and arteries of Caral's economy. Dried fish, cotton, fruits and handmade goods flowed up and down the coast. In exchange, Caral received exotic goods, colourful shells from Pacific, rare stones from Andes, ideas from distant peoples. They weren't isolated, they were connected. The pyramids of peace rising from desert like ancient guardians. The pyramids of Caral defy everything we thought we knew about early civilization in the Americas. These weren't small, crude structures built by primitive hands. They were massive, deliberate works of architecture created by people with vision, organization, and ambition. The centerpiece was the Pyramid Mare, the largest of Caral's monumental structures. It stretched more than 450 feet in length and towered nearly 60 feet above desert floor, a feat of engineering on par with early wonders of the ancient world. Built from stone, mud, and woven reed bags filled with rocks, the pyramid was designed not just to endure harsh climate, but to withstand punishing earthquakes that occasionally rattled the region. But Caral's pyramids weren't tombs. Unlike massive burial complexes of Egypt, Caral's pyramids served different purposes. They were centres of ceremony, power, and public life. Temples and gathering spaces crowned their summits, accessible by broad, elegant staircases. Fires once burned atop these platforms, and rituals were held beneath endless Peruvian sky. At pyramids' feet, vast plazas opened up, sunken and circular, inviting thousands to gather for religious ceremonies, political meetings, and communal celebrations. The very design of Caral's cityscape suggested society that prized community and order, people deeply connected to one another and to cosmos. The pyramids seem strategically placed, aligned with celestial events. Sunrises, solstices, cycles of stars. To Caral's people, architecture wasn't just practical. It was spiritual, mathematical, cosmic. A civilization without war. Among Caral's ruins, there's something profoundly different that sets it apart from so many ancient civilizations. No weapons have been found buried beneath its sands. No defensive walls circle its plazas. No mass graves hint at bloody conquest or internal strife. Unlike kingdoms that rose and fell through war, Caral was society built on peace. Here was civilization that flourished not through violence but through cooperation, trade and shared belief. The people of Caral invested energy not in armies or fortresses but in architecture, astronomy, music and communal life. Their plazas and pyramids weren't monuments to victory over enemies. They were centres of celebration, worship and governance. Trade was Caral's lifeblood. Cotton grown along fertile riverbanks was spun into fishing nets traded with coastal communities. In return, Caral received dried fish, essential protein source, and exotic goods from far places. This wide network stitched the region together, binding far-flung communities into a peaceful web of mutual benefit. Religious and ceremonial life played vital roles in maintaining social harmony. The city's grand public spaces likely served as stages for rituals that united people under shared spiritual beliefs. Music filled these gatherings, flutes carved from condor bones, drums made from deer hides, creating soundscapes that echoed across desert. Leadership appeared to rely less on military strength and more on spiritual authority and civic organisation. City leaders coordinated massive construction projects, seasonal agricultural cycles, and complex trade agreements, all without leaving brutal scars of war. The symphony of ancient Caral wasn't just a city of buildings and trade. It was alive with sound, ceremony, and spiritual rhythm. Music and ritual were woven into the very heartbeat of Caral civilization. Archaeologists digging through dry sands uncovered treasure troves of ancient instruments, flutes crafted from condor and pelican bones, whistles fashioned from deer antlers, small drums stretched with animal hides. These weren't simple toys, they were crafted with care, tuned to specific notes, designed to carry sound across wide open plazas. In a world without written language, music spoke the language of the soul. Imagine it, low thrum of drums rising at dusk, flutes keening like desert wind, feet stamping on sunken plazas as hundreds gathered under fading light. Fires would crackle atop pyramid platforms. Priests dressed in intricate woven garments would chant to gods of river, earth, and stars. In those moments, Caral wasn't just a city, it was a symphony. The layout of Caral suggests ritual life was at its core. Grand plazas weren't mere open spaces. They were stages for communal ceremonies, carefully designed to draw people together. Sunken circular courts acted like ancient amphitheatres, focusing sound and sight onto rituals performed at their centres. Above them all, pyramids loomed. Not as tombs, but as sacred mountains built by human hands, linking earth to heavens. Rituals likely marked turning of seasons, cycles of planting and harvest, movements of stars. Music wasn't just entertainment. It was a bridge between people, between nature and divine, between known and mysteries beyond. No violent murals, no terrifying gods of war, no bloodthirsty sacrifices. In Caral, the spiritual world seems to have been one of harmony, celebration, and reverence. Even today, when desert wind whistles through ruins, you can almost hear it. Faint strains of ancient music, forgotten songs of people who found beauty, meaning, and connection in the heart of harsh, endless sands. Engineering marvels in the desert. Caral wasn't just a place of music, trade, and ritual. It was a marvel of engineering, testament to human ingenuity in one of Earth's harshest landscapes. Without metal tools, without the wheel, without draft animals, Caral's people shaped a city of stone and earth that has endured nearly 5,000 years. Their achievements were astonishing. Massive pyramids rose from desert floor, constructed not with small, fragile bricks, but with enormous stones carried across dry valleys. Workers transported rocks using reed bags, ingenious baskets strong enough to bear heavy loads, woven from plants that grew along riverbanks. Layer upon layer they built with care, stacking stone and filling interiors with rubble to create structures that could withstand not only time but nature's fury. And they understood nature well. Caral lies in a region prone to violent earthquakes, yet their pyramids and plazas survived largely intact. How? By mastering earthquake-resistant architecture. Builders used flexible construction techniques, layered fills, wide foundations, rounded corners that allowed monuments to absorb and dissipate seismic energy. It was engineering born not from textbooks, but from intimate knowledge of Earth itself. Water management was another silent triumph. Despite living in desert, Caral's people developed sophisticated irrigation systems. Channels and canals carefully guided river water to agricultural fields, allowing crops to flourish even during dry seasons. No water was wasted. Every drop mattered. Urban planning and cosmic alignment. The layout of Caral reflected brilliant urban planning. Major structures aligned with key astronomical points, suggesting deep understanding of solar cycles. Sunken plazas with their precise geometry were more than gathering places. They were instruments for tracking heavens, allowing priests and astronomers to predict seasons crucial for survival. Even the city's organization spoke of complex society. Residential zones, administrative areas, ceremonial centers, all arranged in harmony, balancing communal life with sacred spaces. They built not just for the moment, but for generations. Around pyramids, smaller residential complexes fanned out, likely home to priests, administrators, artisans, and farmers. The pyramids themselves seemed strategically placed, aligned with celestial events, sunrises, solstices, cycles of stars. To Caral's people, architecture wasn't just practical, it was spiritual, mathematical, cosmic. Walking among weathered stones today, it's almost impossible not to feel strange awe. These structures were raised without metal tools, without wheels, without beasts of burden. Yet they rose with symmetry, scale, and staggering precision. Great pyramids of Caral weren't built for vanity or war, They were built to connect earth and sky, community and cosmos, humanity and eternity. The mystery of Caral's decline. For centuries, Caral flourished, a beacon of peace, music, trade and architectural mastery in desert sands. And then, quietly, almost without trace, it was abandoned. No fires marked its fall, no signs of conquest scar its walls, no mass graves or shattered monuments tell stories of sudden disaster. Instead, Caral simply faded. Its plazas emptied, its pyramids left to drifting sands, its flutes and drums silenced by time. Why did they leave? That question still lingers like ghost across Super Valley. Some scholars believe environmental change struck the final blow. Evidence suggests long period of drought may have crippled Caral's agriculture. Without rivers' life-giving waters, fields would have withered. Trade networks dependent on surplus cotton and food would have faltered. The careful balance Caral had maintained with harsh environment may have finally tipped beyond repair. Other theories point to shifting trade routes. As neighbouring cultures grew and new centres of power emerged along coast and inland, Caral's influence might have diminished. Perhaps goods they once supplied, cotton, fish, produce, were no longer enough to sustain their role as dominant city. Slowly, lifeblood of commerce drained away. Still others whisper of internal decline. Without written records, we can only imagine political struggles, religious upheaval, or simple exhaustion after centuries of growth. Even peaceful societies can fracture under pressure when survival becomes uncertain. Whatever the cause, departure seems to have been gradual, not sudden. Families likely drifted away one by one, seeking more fertile valleys, stronger rivers, new beginnings. Children who once ran across Caral's plazas grew up telling stories of lost city behind them. Stories that would eventually fade into legend. Desert reclaimed what humans had built. Winds carried fine sand over stone temples. Flutes lay buried beneath shifting dunes. What had once been humming, vibrant civilization became field of silent, sleeping mounds. Caral's rediscovery was more than academic triumph. It was resurrection. A civilization that had slept beneath desert for thousands of years now stood revealed under open sky once more. Its plazas kissed by same winds that had once carried sounds of flutes and laughter of children. The discovery shook foundations of archaeology. Before Caral, scholars believed civilization in Americas developed much later, shadowed by great empires of old world. Caral changed everything. It proved Americas had birthed monumental architecture, complex urban life, and social organization independently, long before rise of Incas or Maya. Ruth Shady and her team found not just stone and rubble, but remnants of life. Musical instruments, fishing nets, textiles, quipu, ancient knot records, and offerings made to gods. Each artifact told story of people who had built society with vision, intelligence, and profound creativity. Today, Caral is recognized as UNESCO World Heritage Site. Fragile, priceless link to humanity's earliest dreams of building, belonging, and believing. Sands had hidden Caral well, but in the end, stones endured, waiting for someone to listen, to see, to remember. The implications were staggering. Here was proof that complex civilization had emerged independently in Americas, at the same time as earliest cities in Mesopotamia and Egypt. It challenged old assumptions about how and where human societies first developed urban life, monumental architecture and sophisticated social organization. Sweet dreams, and may you rest well knowing that you are part of something much larger and more enduring than any individual life. The great ongoing adventure of human civilization reaching always toward the light. If you are still not asleep, please consider playing our playlist History for Sleep, and do not forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. If you haven't done yet, let us know in the comments from where you are listening. Lessons from two civilizations. As we reflect on these two remarkable stories, medieval peasants fighting for survival and ancient Caral thriving in harmony, we see fascinating contrasts and surprising connections. Both faced harsh environments that tested human endurance to its limits. Both developed ingenious solutions using available resources and community cooperation. Medieval peasants survived through stubborn determination, family bonds, and refusal to surrender to cold. They created warmth through shared body heat, strategic fire management, and communal support systems. Their survival was about endurance, making it through one more night, one more winter, one more season. Caral's people, by contrast, didn't just survive their harsh environment, they transformed it. They turned desert into garden, built monuments that touched sky, created society based on peace rather than conflict. Their achievement was about transcendence, rising above limitations to create something beautiful and lasting. Yet both civilizations understood fundamental truth. Survival requires community. Whether huddling together for warmth in medieval hut or gathering in Caral's grand plazas for ceremony, humans thrive when they support one another. Both societies developed sophisticated knowledge of their environments, learning to work with natural forces rather than against them. Both also faced ultimate test of time. Medieval peasants passed their survival knowledge down through generations, their descendants eventually building warmer homes and more comfortable lives. Caral's people, for reasons we may never fully understand, saw their civilization fade into sand and silence. Caral stands today as silent giant, reminder that civilization's roots stretch far deeper than we once believed. Among its pyramids and plazas, ancient stones whisper story that reshapes our understanding of humanity's journey. Story not of conquest and bloodshed, but of harmony, ingenuity, and hope. Long before towering empires of Greece, Rome, or even Egypt, Caral's people were building something extraordinary. They raised pyramids without wheels, mapped stars without written records, created thriving society rooted in trade, music, ritual, and engineering, all without leaving scars of war upon land. In an era often defined by conflict, Caral offers another vision of what civilization can be. Society that valued connection over conquest, knowledge over domination. It reminds us that complexity doesn't require violence, that greatness isn't measured by armies marching across battlefields, but by how community comes together to build, to create, to dream. Medieval peasants too left their mark on history. Their blood, sweat and ingenuity are stitched invisibly into lives we live now. Every cosy blanket, every warm house, every lazy winter evening spent sipping tea under soft lights. All result of countless medieval peasants refusing to give in to cold. Both stories teach us that even when civilizations fall, their spirit can endure. Sleeping under sands, waiting to be remembered, waiting to inspire again. In great timeline of human history, both Caral and medieval survival shine not just as relics of past, but as beacons for future. Reminders that even in harshest deserts, even under heaviest sands, seeds of wonder, wisdom and peace can take root and build world that reaches for stars. And there we have it. Two incredible stories of human resilience separated by thousands of years, but united by the indomitable human spirit. From medieval peasants fighting tooth and nail against winter's deadly embrace to the peaceful builders of Caral creating monuments that still inspire awe today, we see the remarkable capacity of humans to not just survive, but to thrive in the face of seemingly impossible odds. These stories remind us that our ancestors weren't just surviving. They were innovating, creating and building foundations for the world we know today. Whether it was banking fires in medieval hearths or aligning pyramids with celestial bodies in ancient Peru, humans have always found ways to push beyond mere survival towards something greater. I hope you've enjoyed this journey through time as much as I have. If you did, please give this video a like, subscribe for more deep dives into history, and let me know in the comments which story resonated most with you. The stubborn survival of medieval peasants or the peaceful achievements of Caral. Until next time, remember that every comfort we enjoy today stands on the shoulders of countless ancestors who refused to give up, who found ways to create warmth in the cold, beauty in the harsh, and hope in the darkness. Sweet dreams, and thank you for joining me on this incredible journey through human history. As we reach the end of our journey tonight, I want us to take a moment to really absorb what we've discovered. These aren't just ancient stories gathering dust in history books. They're the living DNA of human civilization, the genetic code of our species' greatest strengths. Think about it. Right now, as you're listening to this, you're probably in a warm, comfortable space. Maybe you've got a hot drink nearby, soft lighting, perhaps a cozy blanket. The temperature is probably perfectly controlled, and if you're hungry, food is just a few steps away. This comfort, this safety that we take for granted exists because thousands of years ago people refused to accept that freezing to death was inevitable. Every innovation we've discussed tonight, from the medieval peasant stuffing moss into wall cracks to the Caral engineers designing earthquake-resistant pyramids, represents a small victory against the forces that would have erased humanity from the planet. These weren't grand gestures or heroic moments that made it into epic poems. They were quiet, determined acts of survival and creation that accumulated over centuries into the foundation of everything we know. The medieval peasant who figured out how to bank a fire properly didn't know they were contributing to a chain of knowledge that would eventually lead to central heating systems. The Caral architect who aligned a pyramid with the stars didn't realize they were laying groundwork for astronomical sciences that would one day put humans on the moon. But what can these ancient stories teach us today? In our world of climate-controlled buildings and instant global communication, what wisdom can we draw from people who slept next to goats for warmth or built cities without metal tools? First, there's the power of community. Both the medieval villagers and Caral succeeded because they understood that survival, and more importantly thriving, requires some cooperation. The medieval peasants who shared their fires, their food, and even their beds with neighbours weren't just being kind, they were being smart. They recognized that individual survival was impossible without collective support. Caral took this even further, building an entire civilization on the principle of mutual benefit rather than conquest. In our modern world, where we often feel isolated despite being more connected than ever, these ancient examples remind us that our greatest achievements come when we work together, not when we compete against each other. Second, there's the importance of working with nature rather than against it. The medieval peasants didn't try to conquer winter. They learned to dance with it, to find ways to coexist with forces far greater than themselves. Caral's people didn't try to dominate the desert. They partnered with it, understanding its rhythms and finding ways to make it bloom. As we face our own environmental challenges today, these ancient examples offer a different model. Instead of seeing nature as something to be conquered or controlled, we might learn to see it as something to be understood and worked with. Perhaps most importantly, both stories demonstrate the incredible persistence of human creativity. When faced with seemingly impossible challenges, humans don't just find ways to survive, they find ways to create beauty, meaning, and joy even in the harshest circumstances. The medieval peasants, despite living in conditions that would horrify us today, still found time for storytelling around their fires, for community celebrations, for the small rituals that make life worth living. They didn't just endure, they maintained their humanity. Caral's people went even further, creating art, music and architecture that served no practical survival purpose but enriched their lives immeasurably. They could have built simple shelters and focused solely on growing enough food to survive. Instead, they built pyramids that reached toward the heavens and created music that echoed across the desert. This tells us something profound about human nature. We're not just survival machines programmed to seek food, shelter, and reproduction. We're meaning-making creatures who need beauty, connection, and purpose as much as we need warmth and food. Both stories also teach us about the delicate balance between fragility and resilience that characterizes all human civilizations. Medieval peasants lived constantly on the edge of disaster. One failed harvest, one particularly harsh winter, one epidemic could wipe out entire communities. Yet somehow they persisted for centuries, passing down their knowledge and gradually improving their conditions. Caral, despite its achievements, eventually faded into the desert sands. We still don't fully understand why. Climate change, shifting trade routes, internal conflicts, any or all of these factors might have contributed to its decline. The civilization that seemed so permanent, so well established, proved to be as fragile as morning frost. This should humble us. Our own civilization, with all its technological marvels and global connections, is not immune to the forces that brought down Caral or that threatened medieval communities every winter. We like to think we've conquered the uncertainties that plagued our ancestors, but in reality, we've simply traded old vulnerabilities for new ones. At the same time, these stories show us the incredible resilience of human knowledge and culture. Even when Caral was abandoned and forgotten, the innovations its people developed, agricultural techniques, architectural methods, social organizations, didn't disappear entirely. They influenced neighboring cultures and contributed to the great civilizations that followed. Similarly, the survival techniques developed by medieval peasants weren't lost when people moved into warmer houses. They evolved, adapted, and contributed to the technologies and social systems we rely on today. This brings us to perhaps the most important lesson of all, the crucial importance of remembering. Caral was lost for thousands of years, not because its stones crumbled, but because people forgot it existed. The knowledge and achievements of its people nearly vanished forever, saved only by the dedicated work of archaeologists like Ruth Shady, who refused to accept that those mysterious mounds were just natural formations. How many other Carals are still out there, buried under sand or jungle, or simply forgotten by history? How many innovations, how many solutions to problems we still face today have been lost because no one remembered to preserve them? This is why stories like the ones we've shared tonight matter so much. They're not just entertainment or academic curiosities. They're the preserved memory of our species, the accumulated wisdom of thousands of generations who've faced challenges and found ways to overcome them. Every time we tell these stories, every time we remember the ingenuity of a medieval peasant banking a fire, or the vision of Caral's architects aligning pyramids with stars, we're keeping alive knowledge that might prove crucial for our own survival and flourishing. As I've been researching and preparing this content, I found myself thinking a lot about my own life, my own challenges, and how they compare to what our ancestors faced. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by modern problems. Work stress, relationship difficulties, financial pressures, global uncertainties. But when I consider what medieval peasants dealt with every single day, or the challenges faced by Caral's people in building a civilization from scratch in the desert, it puts things in perspective. I'm not saying our problems aren't real or important. Mental health struggles, social isolation, economic inequality, these are serious issues that deserve attention and solutions. But there's something powerful about connecting with the long chain of human endurance that stretches back through history. When a medieval peasant woke up on a freezing morning and had to choose between staying under their scratchy blankets or getting up to tend the fire that kept their family alive, they were making the same fundamental choice we all make every day. The choice to keep going, to face whatever challenges the day might bring, to find ways to not just survive but to create meaning and connection in the midst of difficulty. When Caral's people decided to build pyramids that would outlast their own lives, they were expressing the same hope that drives us today. The belief that our efforts matter, that we can create something lasting and beautiful, that the future can be better than the present. The stories we've shared tonight don't end with the abandonment of Caral or the eventual improvement of medieval living conditions. They continue in every act of human creativity, cooperation and persistence happening right now all around the world. Every time someone helps a neighbour in need, they're continuing the tradition of medieval villagers who shared their fires and food during harsh winters. Every time an engineer designs a building to withstand earthquakes, they're building on knowledge that stretches back to Caral's architects. Every time a community comes together to solve a problem through cooperation rather than conflict, they're following the peaceful model established by Caral's people. Every time someone refuses to give up in the face of seemingly impossible odds, they're channeling the same stubborn determination that kept medieval peasants alive through winter after winter. Every time an artist creates something beautiful, not because it's practical, but because it feeds the human soul, they're honouring the same impulse that led Caral's people to carve flutes from condor bones and build pyramids that touch the sky. We are not separate from these ancient people. We are their continuation, their living legacy. The blood that flows through our veins carries the genetic memory of every winter survived, every challenge overcome, every moment of beauty created in the midst of hardship. The technologies we use, the social systems we participate in, the very languages we speak, all of these are evolved versions of innovations first developed by people like those we've discussed tonight. We stand on their shoulders, and someday, if we're wise and fortunate, future generations will stand on ours. If there's one message I hope you take away from tonight's journey through time, it's this. Humans are incredibly, almost impossibly, resilient and creative. We have survived ice ages and droughts, plagues and famines, wars and natural disasters. We have built civilizations in deserts and jungles, on mountains and islands, in places where life seemed impossible. More than that, we haven't just survived. We've created beauty. We've made music and art, told stories and built monuments, developed philosophies and scientific theories. We've reached for the stars, both literally and metaphorically, always pushing beyond mere survival towards something greater. This doesn't mean the future is guaranteed to be bright. Caral's people probably thought their civilization would last forever, and medieval peasants couldn't have imagined the comfortable lives their descendants would eventually enjoy. Civilizations rise and fall, knowledge is lost and rediscovered, progress is never linear or certain. But the human capacity for adaptation, innovation and cooperation has proven remarkably durable across thousands of years and countless challenges. Whatever problems we face today, climate change, technological disruption, social division, economic uncertainty, we face them as the inheritors of an incredibly rich tradition of human problem solving. We have in our collective memory the knowledge of how to survive in the harshest conditions, how to build lasting institutions, how to create beauty and meaning even in difficult circumstances. We have examples of societies that chose cooperation over conflict, sustainability over short-term gain, community welfare over individual advantage. With this inheritance comes responsibility. We are the current custodians of human knowledge and culture. The stories we choose to remember and tell, the innovations we choose to preserve and build upon, the values we choose to embody and pass on, these decisions will shape what future generations inherit from us. The archaeologists who rediscovered Caral didn't just uncover old stones. They recovered a different model of how human societies can organize themselves. A proof that civilization doesn't have to be built on conquest and violence. That knowledge is now available to us, but only if we choose to learn from it. The survival techniques developed by medieval peasants aren't just historical curiosities. They represent hard-won knowledge about community cooperation, resource management and psychological resilience that could prove valuable as we face our own challenges. But this knowledge only matters if we remember it, study it, and find ways to apply its lessons to our current circumstances. Every generation has to choose whether to build on the wisdom of the past or to ignore it and start from scratch. As we look toward the future, we can draw inspiration from both the medieval peasants who refused to surrender to winter's deadly embrace, and the Caral people who built something beautiful and lasting in the heart of the desert. We can learn from their successes and their failures, their innovations and their limitations. We can ask ourselves, what kind of ancestors do we want to be? What knowledge and innovations do we want to pass on to future generations? What kind of civilization do we want to build? Will we choose the path of cooperation and sustainability modelled by Caral, or will we repeat the mistakes that have brought down so many civilizations throughout history? Will we develop the kind of community resilience that helped medieval villages survive harsh winters? Or will we remain isolated and vulnerable? Will we create beauty and meaning alongside practical solutions? Or will we focus solely on material survival? Will we work with natural forces or against them? Will we build for the long term or just for immediate gain? These aren't just abstract philosophical questions, they're practical choices we make every day in how we treat our neighbours, how we use resources, how we organise our communities, how we respond to challenges. Ultimately, the stories we've shared tonight are part of one larger story, the story of humanity's ongoing struggle to survive, thrive and create meaning in a universe that is often indifferent to our existence. It's a story that began hundreds of thousands of years ago when our ancestors first learned to control fire, and it continues today as we grapple with challenges they could never have imagined. But the fundamental themes remain the same: the importance of community, the power of innovation, the necessity of adaptation, the drive to create beauty and meaning, the responsibility to care for future generations. Every person who has ever lived has been part of this story. The medieval peasant shivering in a drafty hut, the Caral architect calculating the alignment of a pyramid, the modern scientist working on climate solutions, the teacher passing on knowledge to the next generation, the artist creating something beautiful, the neighbour helping in time of need. All are part of the same great human adventure. We don't know how this story will end. We don't know what challenges future generations will face or what innovations they'll develop to meet them. But we do know that they'll face those challenges with the same fundamental human capacities that have carried our species through every previous crisis: creativity, cooperation, persistence, and hope. As we come to the end of our time together tonight, I want to thank you for joining me on this journey through time. We've travelled from the frozen huts of medieval Europe to the sun-baked pyramids of ancient Peru, from the desperate survival strategies of peasant families to the sophisticated urban planning of one of the world's first cities. We've seen how humans have always found ways to not just survive, but to thrive, to create, to build something lasting and beautiful, even in the most challenging circumstances. We've learned that our ancestors were not primitive or simple, but incredibly sophisticated in their understanding of their environments and their ability to work together to overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. Most importantly, we've been reminded that we are part of this continuing story. The challenges we face today are different from those faced by medieval peasants or Caral's people, but they require the same fundamental human qualities: ingenuity, cooperation, persistence, and hope. The next time you flip a switch and light floods your room, remember the medieval peasants who spent their nights tending fires to keep their families alive. The next time you turn up your thermostat, think of the countless generations who huddled together for warmth and developed the technologies that eventually led to central heating. The next time you're amazed by a beautiful building or moved by a piece of music, remember the people of Caral who built pyramids and carved flutes, not because they had to, but because they understood that humans need beauty and meaning as much as they need food and shelter. The next time you face a challenge that seems insurmountable, remember that you carry within you the genetic and cultural inheritance of every human who has ever refused to give up, who has ever found a way forward when the path seemed blocked, who has ever chosen hope over despair. You are the continuation of their story. You are their living legacy. And someday, if we're wise and fortunate, future generations will look back on our time and draw inspiration from the choices we made, the problems we solved, the beauty we created, and the hope we maintained even in difficult times. Thank you for being part of this continuing human story. Thank you for choosing to remember, to learn, and to carry forward the wisdom of the past into an uncertain but potentially magnificent future. Sweet dreams, and may you rest well knowing that you are part of something much larger and more enduring than any individual life. The great ongoing adventure of human civilization reaching always toward the light.